All right. And welcome to a Bad Faith live stream with the one and only Leslie Lee the Third. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey Bree, how's it going?
It is always a pleasure to sit down with you. Now, Leslie, for some context, the reason that we're here tonight is that I got a random text from out of the blue from you to me saying, "Hey Bree, I'd love to talk about that Ezra Klein interview with you."
I believe I said Bree, if you're dragging Ezra Klein, because I could sense it. I could sense the anger in you. Like how in The Dark Knight Rises, Joseph Gordon-Levitt was able to tell that Bruce Wayne was Batman because he could see the anger in him. I could read the anger behind your tweets about it and knew you wanted to talk about it. And
I mean, you're right. I've been rage tweeting about this for like the last 24 hours. I took a brief break during Run Club yesterday and immediately would walking to the subway to get home afterward, looked at my phone and was angered again listening to the second half of this episode. And I listened to it again in anticipation of us uh, recording about it today to take notes about the specific bits that really got under my skin. Leslie, before we get into doing a play by play, tell me what your overall impressions were and why you felt like you would be a good partner for me in expressing angst over this interview.
I don't know if I'm the perfect partner. It's just that I've been kind of somewhat obsessed with the intro to an episode of Ezra Klein's terrible, terrible podcast for about a month and a half now, since July, since he put it out, because he was talking about the Epstein case. And this was the intro of Ezra Klein's show, where he specifically said that if he had to give his assessment of the Jeffrey Epstein case, he would say that there was no Epstein list, that Epstein kept his private life, his work life, and his predator life separate. And none of those rich and powerful men that have been seen with him with young women had any involvement in anything illegal. That's what Ezra Klein said. And I thought it was amazing because Ezra Klein is this really dweebish, milk toasty sort of liberal guy, and he's kind of tried to pivot since comma was lost. He's kind of tried to rebrand himself a few different ways, and I thought it was so strange that like he would go so far as to say that the essentially saying that the victims of the most prominent and well-known pedophile in human history, perhaps, are all like lying. And like he had no problem with that, working with the New York Times, basically saying this after Me Too. And I thought that was just a fascinating pivot for him. And I've just been thinking about him and what is he trying to do? What is he trying to accomplish? Like I tried to
Yeah.
ignore the abundance thing because I thought like obviously it was like a PR like bullshit that was going to go nowhere. So I kind of ignored it while everybody was talking about it because I knew it was going nowhere. But Ezra Klein is still trying to make something of himself, which is pathetic, really. And I wanted to talk about this because it's so obviously is completely like devoid of any real content or politics. You watched it twice. Did you learn anything about
Yeah.
Ezra Klein's beliefs or politics or anything from it? Because I there's so little there. There's
I mean,
so
I
little there.
did because that's the problem. Like, I think I've transitioned from anger to sort of sadness because something that comes out of this interview is how Ezra Klein doesn't see his role as being one of moral authority. And we'll get into this, but a few well placed questions by Coates gets into this. I mean, Coates is clear that he sees himself as a part of politics and as having a role in sort of enforcing what they refer to in the conversation as a line. I might refer to it as a litmus test or some sort of moral guardrails for society. And to the extent that he's involved in the work of persuasion, it is to persuade people to respect some moral boundaries. Whereas Ezra Klein doesn't see himself as trying to persuade people to agree with his own moral center to the extent that he even really has one. It is instead to persuade people to agree with political positions that he thinks will win. So it goes for Klein from poll testing to persuasion without any sense of like morality or what's right or wrong, what people should believe to begin with. So he almost abandons the potential project of ever persuading someone to do the right thing, only the politically expedient thing, and almost has this sort of fatalism, which is a word that comes up again and again as he's describing Coates's politics, ironically, but a kind of fatalism that the right thing to do and the politically expedient thing to do are ever the right thing. And that huge hole allows him to ignore the fact that Gaza, for instance, is a place where the Democratic Party could have distinguished itself from the Republicans, that Harris could have distinguished herself from Biden and actually won the nomination without needing to throw various communities under the bus, without needing to do what he said we should do in a recent interview he did with Rouse Douthat, which is to start running more anti-choice candidates, which makes no sense because in the states that he pointed to, pro-choice ballot measures were successful, and it was those pro-choice ballot measures that drove people to the polls, saved Democrats from a red wave, and outperformed Democrats in that state. But he doesn't. It's almost anathema to him. It doesn't occur to him. It's almost like he has a prejudice against the possibility of the right thing to do being the politically expedient thing to do. And as Ta-Nehisi Coates points out at a certain point in the interview, he's like, there were other off-ramps before we get to abandon abortion. Like, for example, what you've argued for, Ezra Klein, which is that Biden shouldn't have been the nominee. People shouldn't have covered up for his senility for all of this time. But for that, we might have won. And whenever Coates raises a point like that, Ezra Klein sort of yada, yada, yadas it. And or like moves the goalpost or pivots. Exactly. He pivots. So we can go through this a bunch of ways. We can start sort of chronologically. I've got a lot of timestamps, but before I do that, I want to give you an opportunity to say like there's one particular part I want to start with, or that you want to say before we get into it.
No, you can go full steam ahead. We'll get to it because I really feel like Ezra is so simple. It's so simple, and Coates is just so nice.
Yeah, I do think, and I tweeted this, like I have a lot of respect for not Ezra, for Ta-Nehisi Coates. I have disagreed with him vocally in the past. I wrote a piece in New York Magazine that was a sort of rebuttal to his Donald Trump is the first white president piece, because ironically, Ta-Nehisi Coates has historically sort of, I wouldn't call it Afro-pessimism, but he has engaged in a different kind of sort of logic sort of elapse, where he's someone who is very aware of race in American politics and the role it plays in the ways that racial division have been weaponized by the Republicans, this classic Southern strategy to convince poor and working class whites, who are the bulk of poor and working class people in the United States, to forego their access to much needed social safety net programs if they're sold on the idea that it's going to help the undeserving poor, meaning blacks, Latinos, immigrants, et cetera. And we see Donald Trump very much using this playbook as we speak. But even though Ta-Nehisi Coates was aware of that, he sort of was in this kind of post-Trump 2017 anti-Bernie lane where he was insisting that the Democrats frame everything with respect to race. And I basically asked the question in this article, if you have no class politics, I get why you're so focused on only one form of messaging, or the idea that it's a zero-sum game. You either abandon these constituency groups or you frame everything in terms of these constituency groups, knowing that it's going to cost you elections. But there's a third way. To use some verboten language, there's a third way, which is you don't have to say I hate blacks. You don't have to move to the right on immigration. You don't have to ignore these issues, but you can appeal to other kinds of priorities that these poor and working class people have and ask them, hey, this is what's being done. The messaging that they're trying to divide us up and we should resist that has polled as being very favorable. People understand that. American people understand that they're not stupid. So why not speak to them on their level and say, here are economic populist policies that are going to help you. And then you don't have to engage in this kind of culture war the way that conservatives want you to do. And I I talked to him about this. I ended up running into him at, ironically, an AOC event at a church in New York. We sat next to each other sort of accidentally, ended up going out into the hallway to have a conversation because we were chit-chatting so much that they asked us to shush, like leave the room. And he was so gracious. He said he had read the article, that some points had been made, and we were able to have a really like graceful exchange. And since then, obviously, his writing on Gaza, I think spending his political capital on that, I think is deeply meaningful to me. I think it was very courageous of him. He was working at The Atlantic for the bulk of his career, that is run by a famous Zionist and former IDF soldier.
Oh, well,
And
let's be clear, Bree. He was a former IDF concentration camp guard, even though
guard,
he
yeah,
is an American. He worked at a
that's right.
concentration camp. Jeffrey
That's
Goldberg,
right.
yes.
Jeffrey Goldberg. So, like, I understand what it took for him to do that. And I think his voice in particular at that moment was really meaningful. And whatever disagreements I have with him, I have an enormous amount of respect for Ta-Nehisi Coates. That being said, it was interesting to watch this because there's clearly been an evolution in his politics. But I think part of why he wasn't able to like completely destroy Klein in the way that I would have liked to have seen. Maybe that's an immature way for me to put it, but it's like
Oh no, no,
totally
that's the
demolish his
right way to do
arguments.
politics, according to Ezra Klein. It's supposed to be you post you talk to somebody, you post a clip saying you destroyed them. The younger, the better. The more vulnerable, the better. That's the right way to do politics.
Good point. Good callback. Yeah, but I think that he would have been more effective. Let me put it that way, if he had a real a stronger grasp on the class arguments, because there are a couple of times where he comes up to the brink and like I said, he says, well, we could have. Ezra keeps defining the terms, right? So that like he's like, I don't want to give up on abortion. I don't want to give up on trans people. I share your moral view of these things. But if we lose, then trans people are imperiled and abortion rights are imperiled. So what am I to do? If we gotta play in the mud to win, then isn't winning and being able to protect those rights the best thing to do? And so then I would argue a couple of things. One, Roe got overturned under Biden. And I recorded an episode with David Dayan of the American Prospect today that's going to come out on Thursday where we get into this. So I won't belabor the point. But the powers that Trump is claiming for himself right now were available to Biden. Trump overturned the parliamentarian last week. Biden wouldn't do it to save a $15 minimum wage. For us to be sitting here, sorry, let me take this off. For us to be sitting here and saying, well, we have to play in the mud to win. When we had won and Democrats had won and had a trifecta and declined to not play in the mud, but to do the things that were necessary to ensure the rights of the people that they essentially are supposed to protect were protected. The Dobbs decision got leaked months before Roe, and still Joe Biden was unwilling to seriously consider court reform, getting rid of the filibusters, packing the court, threatening to pack the court, doing what needed to be done to make sure that abortion rights were overturned. At a certain point, it becomes obvious that Democrats are intentionally fumbling the ball to give them an excuse to move to the right. And people like Ezra Klein, increasingly, it's difficult to avoid the cynical interpretation of their politics, which is that they're frothing at the mouth, frankly, for an opportunity to move to the right, and that they don't, in fact, share Ta-Nehisi Coates' moral commitments. And that's why, and we'll get to this, Ta-Nehisi Coates at one point, it's like, calls him out, saying, "What? It doesn't even make sense. It's not even politically practicable. It's not even politically expedient to give up on abortion. It's one of Democrats' most popular issues, and it helped them win in all of these states." And Ezra Klein's like, "Oh, well, I was talking off the cuff. I didn't really mean that in particular, but it's just an illustrative example," he says. And Ta-Nehisi Coates says, "Well, if you're going to say something as serious like you're willing to gamble away abortion rights, you better know what you're talking about. You better be being specific, because there are people who are running on this kind of policy program." And then he kind of changes the subject and yada, yada, yada. But that's the point. When you are willing to be placed so fast and loose within a right that is so core, not just to the Democratic Party's popularity, but to the substantive rights of half the people in this country, and you don't even know what you're talking about, it suggests, I would argue very strongly, that your core moral commitments are non-existent, and they certainly aren't where Ta-Nehisi Coates' are.
Agreed. I think that was a lot, Bree. I think
Sorry.
I'll jump in once we get in. Let's get into the clips, but I do want to talk about the things like the things Ezra Klein chooses as his examples for who to screw over and fuck over and why. Like, but I'm sure you have clips about it.
Okay, let's go. Let's just start in the beginning where they set up this conversation. And to be clear, this conversation was had because Ezra Klein wrote an article immediately after, the day after Charlie Kirk was killed, saying that Charlie Kirk did politics, quote, exactly the right way. He quoted none of the substance of what Charlie Kirk's messaging was, what he believed in, not one word of substance about what Charlie Kirk believed, not even to say the sort of like pro forma, oh, well, I disagree, but sort of a thing. And lauded Charlie Kirk for, quote, what he built and said it was, quote, enviable. Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote a response piece that really just hit the nail on the head, and called him out for declining to talk about the substance of what he did, or the fact that Charlie Kirk was only able to do so because he was millionaire backed and all of this kind of stuff. So because they're friends, then they decided to sit down for this conversation. This is kind of up top, just setting it up. Let's get into it. Whoops. Sorry.
Some version of the way you saw him, right? That's not my view of.
Sorry. I'm giving away that I listen to everything super, super quickly, going back down to normal speed. Here we go. Let me make sure I got this right. 537, yeah.
The person's whole legacy, but going to people when they're grieving like that and saying, listen, I want to tell you really what I thought of your friend. Just feels like not what you do in a kind of a community. I can see people coming down on both sides of that.
I actually think that actually is a great impulse, that after somebody's been killed, and not just killed, but because we live in the media environment that we live in, that it's seen and that it will live forever, and that person's family, you know what I mean?
That it was being looped in front of all of us.
Jesus Christ.
Which I think has a lot to do with how this was taken.
No, it's terrible. It's terrible. And to have to go, like, to have young kids who have to grow up knowing that is a thing that exists in the world. You know what I mean?
And I'll go one step further on this. One thing I wrote about in that piece that I do worry about is I worry we are already in a cycle of political violence, of mimetic violence. I think about Pelosi. I think about Shapiro. I think about the near assassination on Trump. I think about when after that happened, I thought about me. I thought about you. I thought about all kinds of people I know, right? So I do think there's just something about when violence takes hold that you like, that there's something about it that it begins to breach all lines.
Yeah. So
anyway,
I guess
that was part of my reaction too.
I think all of that is understandable, but I guess, was silence not an option?
Yeah, silence to me was not grieving with people. I felt it was important as someone who is liberal, as someone who's a voice, that there are moments like that. Like, I really do feel, and it's funny because you said something like this in your piece, but it was a little bit more offhanded. That political violence like that is an attack on us all.
Right.
And that in that moment, it creates, for me, even if it's very temporary, that it's important in a moment like that to sort of, come together, to try to see other people in their grief, to try to cool things down just a little.
All right. Oh, Bree, you're muted. On the I think on StreamYard.
Okay. In some ways, that is the mic drop moment. Was silence not an option?
Yes.
So much of the discourse, so much of what Ezra Klein has been hiding behind as he's received a volley of criticism in the comment section of the New York Times, from liberals, from leftists, from everyone who didn't actively love Charlie Kirk, was, I understand, his defense has been, well, he had just died. What did you expect me to say? He just died. What did you expect me to say? And Ta-Nehisi,
nothing.
My man, take a seat.
Yes, you could say what you could have said was nothing. And it's so strange to me that he's basically admitting that he felt the need to do this because he thought it was cynically an opportunity to expand his brand. Like, I mean, that's basically what he's saying. Is like, I thought it was important in this moment as a liberal and a voice to speak on this, to speak to the racist, sexist, homophobic, fascist fans of this podcaster. Does he think it's important to speak when, I don't know, a Palestinian doctor is killed? Or if we're talking, for Charlie, but that's an insult. But for Charlie Kirk, I think if you're saying something like this, Ezra Klein should be giving speeches on the Hamas leaders who are killed. If it's about reaching across the aisle. Yep. Seriously, why wouldn't you do that? If this is what you believe, if this is what you actually believe, he picks and chooses who he talks to. Ezra Klein does not have. I don't think Ezra Klein name rings out in the hood. So when a black person or Assata Shakur dies,
right,
he's not saying it's very important that I speak out about this.
Oh my God! The way that there's such a good tweet in that, I might have to steal that.
Steal it. I won't have the cognitive capacity for it. Steal it for real. But it's like there's so many, and this term political violence. First of all, as a true crime fan, I have to point out we do not know the motive. We may never know the motive. We have a suspect under an FBI run by someone who basically has the intellect of Charlie Kirk. Yeah. You couldn't trust most of what the FBI said before. I wouldn't trust a lot saying now. We don't know what happened. That's even when cases are going well and run by competent departments. Finding out the motive. The person who did it may not be able to explain what the motive is. So the immediate assumption within the first 24 hours that Ezra Klein works in news. He knows that when you have these sorts of events, these acts of violence, anything you learn in the first 24 hours may be completely untrue. But he chose to buy into the same narrative that the right did, that Charlie Kirk was murdered by some leftists for his speaking out about his right-wing opinions, just for giving his opinions. We do not know that. And that assumption was so dangerous and still remains dangerous. We don't know that. Second of all, political violence. Don't make me laugh. Is it not political violence when people are being blown up in Gaza? Is it not political violence when Black people are killed or protesters are beaten on the street? Is that not political violence? What happened to the encampments? There's so much we can talk about.
Assassinated by a drone on camera. We all watched this man die. And as brutal, as gruesome an up close execution as was Charlie Kirk. I mean, it's grainier because we're looking at hospital CCTV camera in a war zone and a genocide, and it's not filmed on 1,000 iPhones in the United States of America. But we haven't watched that doctor get killed all day on my timeline, and I did not see one time Ezra Klein wringing his hands about how gruesome it was for people to have to witness that, and how scarring it was, and how there needed to be a eulogy written. In his initial piece, he says, "I'm not the one to eulogize Charlie Kirk," and then he goes on to do it, and it speaks volumes who he's declining to eulogize. All right, getting that one out of the way. This next little segment is about. We're getting into the nut of this, which is that Ezra Klein clearly believes that we're losing. He's freaked out by the fact that Donald Trump has won not once, but twice, and draws the conclusion that it must mean that something fundamentally is being done wrong by the Democrats. And that thing, apparently in Ezra Klein's view, is having morals and values. Let's get into it.
Why are we losing?
We're losing because there are always moments when we lose.
See, that feels very fatalistic to me.
It doesn't feel fatalistic to me. It feels like the truth. I mean, and let me express what I mean. I'm Ta-Nehisi Coates. I'm the writer. I'm the individual, right? But I am part of something larger, and I've always felt myself as part of something larger. I have a tradition. I have ancestry. I have heritage. What that means is that I do whatever I do within the time that I have in my life, whatever time I'm gifted with. And much of what I do is built on what other people did before then. And then after that, I leave the struggle where I leave it. And then hopefully it's in a better place. Oftentimes it's not. That's the history, in fact. And then my progeny pick it up and they keep it going. I am descended from people who in their lifetime fought with all their might for the destruction of chattel slavery in this country. And they never saw it. They never saw it. In my personal belief system, they died in, defeat, in darkness, and so I guess the privilege that I draw out of this, the honor that I draw out of this, is not that things will necessarily be better in my lifetime, but that I will make the contribution that I am supposed to make. The fact of the matter is, as horrifying as, that the killing of Charlie Kirk was, and as horrifying as the feeling is, this moment that we are in, an era of political violence, and I don't want to sound flip here, political violence is the norm for the Black experience in this country. It just is. I don't even mean like the Malcolm X, Martin Luther King variety of it, right? Which is the norm too. You would be hard pressed to have a conversation with a Black person in this country that is a descendant of slavery and not have them be able to reach maybe right here or to tell you themselves, look, my uncle, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, they lived in a small town in Mississippi, in Tennessee, in Alabama. They got into some sort of dispute with a white man, and either they were lynched or we had to run. Political violence runs through us. It is our heritage. Is that good? No. Do we valorize it? Absolutely not. Do we minimize it? Absolutely not. But a life free of it is not a thing that's really in reach in my time.
Agree.
Sometimes I think that having...
Yeah, sorry, I was going to stop it right there. Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, agree to disagree on about whether we valorize political violence. Because again, what are you talking about? You're talking about the United States of America. All we do is valorize violence of all sorts. And also, I don't think there's anything wrong with celebrating righteous radical violence. We made a TV show about Free State of Jones with Matthew McConaughey about I'm sorry, I forget the name of the cat, but just we make people who abolitionists who use violence.
Right.
We celebrate them. There's nothing wrong with that. Like,
sorta. We don't do that enough, to be honest. I mean,
we don't
there's
do that
some
enough, but I don't even think.
But Revolutionary War movies, right?
Yeah,
like every war movie is a movie about
World War
violence.
II.
World War II, of course.
John Brown, thank you, Sid. Thank you,
John Brown. Yeah. Nat Turner. I mean, again, the Hotep take is that the Nat Turner movie got taken down by the Me Too movement because they didn't want Black people to have a win. Yes. But like the Nat Turner movie, scandal aside, was fantastic, but a very rare sort of a framing, because I do think that like Black violence, revolutionary violence, the Haitian where's the Haitian Revolution movie?
Oh no, where's the Dessalines movie? Oh no, they don't want that.
It'll never be made. It'll never be made. They'll punish Haiti until there's not a Haitian left on the planet. It'll never be made.
Yeah.
Like, you're right though. You're right with your bigger point. White violence is celebrated all the time.
Yeah, white violence is celebrated all the time. We celebrate. So like this conversation is taking, and a lot of the people in the chat are mentioning a very privileged place from both Klein and Coates, because I wanted to highlight from the first thing. One of the things he said was, after he saw what happened to Charlie Kirk, one of the first things he said was, I thought about me.
Yes.
Think of how does that go to your brain, and what type of person are you if you think that? Like, and then you want to take the high road and eulogize Charlie Kirk, when frankly you're just as opportunistic as seemingly all the other vultures that were around him. It's almost enough to make you almost feel sorry for him that everyone seems to be capitalizing on his death one way or another. But Ezra Klein just basically openly says, like, I see this as an opportunity to rebuild my brand, because I was afraid that if this could happen to Charlie, it could happen to me. And it's like, Ezra, you're not that high on the streets. I don't think you have anything to worry about. I think that's just ego.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is that for all that the left gets criticized for wanting to have proximity to conservatives because we'll make arguments that are critical of Democrats, and will evince a willingness to say, talk to someone across the aisle, a la Charlie Kirk, frankly. When Ezra Klein does something like this, not just showing willingness to debate or dialogue with someone across the aisle, but a willing to sort of empathize and put himself into the shoes of someone and be like, it me? Like, that doesn't get the same kind of, that somehow like reads differently to the liberal mind as not a sort of disloyalty. And I think that's a really important point that you made, both in his piece and in the rhetoric of a lot of other people, including some leftists. Like, my friend Ryan Grimm also said the thing about how, like, I saw myself in it. I don't want to be killed. I'm a pundit. We have to stand against this. And, like, of course, I'm a pundit. I don't want to be killed. Like, all of us believe the same. That's obviously true. But when I see a Black person get killed by police violence, I also see myself in it, and I don't want to get killed. And I think it's much more likely statistically for me to be killed by police violence, because, like, what, a third of all non-partner violence in America is done by the police, like stranger violence, than it is for me to be randomly killed by a vigilante, even as a pundit. And so they're all saying out loud what, I think a lot of the Black people who have responded to Ezra Klein's column understood very intuitively, which is that they have more sympathy with Charlie Kirk because they see themselves in him, because he's middle class, wealthy, because he's white, because he's a podcaster, and because bad things aren't supposed to happen to people like him.
And we have to just say it again. It's like they have seen, Ezra Klein has seen video after video of children being assassinated. They have seen it. They have. This is so cynical and dishonest. Or unless, I don't know, are their brains really this compartmentalized that they do not see?
They see it, but it's clear that what they're interpreting, what they're seeing, is not what we're seeing. I think that occasionally there's an animal video that comes out of Gaza, like, I was taking care of this cat and Israel even killed my cat. Israel killed the dog. And you'll see, like, a spike in interest around the animal being killed, as opposed to the literal multiple dead, starved, bombed children I've seen in just today. That doesn't click for them in the same way. And I'm not, obviously, this is not all white people, yada yada, but there's a clear difference. Go ahead.
And people are posting in the chat. There's been 3-4 mass shootings since. During the same day one was happening. What are we talking about? What are we talking about when we talk about political violence? Why is Charlie? Thank goodness a lot of this has died down. But really, the main thing is this: is like the right was rather ready to be very cynical and use this for their fascist ends. Like and we're talking about Donald Trump, the government, all the media, all the way to the top. But liberals in the media were so willing to go along with that same narrative. No pushback, no fight. When if the exact opposite happened, if Ta-Nehisi Coates had been assassinated by a white nationalist, what would the right be saying? Would they be?
They'd be dancing on his grave, and there would be no Ta-Nehisi Coates Day. Are you kidding me? There, you wouldn't even get most Democrats even try to make any hay out of it. Most Democrats wouldn't even say anything about it.
We would be talking about how Ta-Nehisi Coates had tarred his legacy with his anti-Semitism in his later days. That's the sort of articles we would be reading.
100%. I said this on Katie's show, so I won't belabor the point. But go look at the clip she spliced of the live stream from last week, where I was like, I don't expect people who hate me to celebrate my life when I die. In fact, maybe if they do, I've done something wrong. Maybe they could be polite about it and give it 24 hours, but I don't have any expectation. I live my life to be celebrated by the people I respect.
And this is another thing. Those are not the rules that we operate under anymore at all. At all. They tried to bring those back. I don't know how to frame it. The internet, online, like we have let go all the rules, the N word, the R word, anything, anybody says anything, people quote unquote crash out all the time. It does not matter. For them to try to pull back to this genteel politics of we don't criticize the dead, when that's like a big thing Charlie Kirk himself did. That's a big thing that the right does and revels in. Like what are we talking about? What are we talking? I mean, in fact, according to some theories, Charlie Kirk was killed by someone of this culture, nihilistic online culture, that now the right is pretended to be offended by. But of course, they participated in, they put them in office. They put them in charge of the government. They put groypers in our government, these people. And I don't know how you talk about civility in Charlie Kirk. And I don't know how Ezra Klein pretends not to understand any of this other stuff.
Yeah, well, I will say that, there are going to be people who are like, it was disproven that it was a groiper and there were mixed signals.
We
And
do
so
not
I don't
know.
want to get into that discourse
Yes,
about
we don't
what the
know.
actual politics of the person
Yes.
were. But the one other part of that clip I don't want to ignore is that I do want to credit Ta-Nehisi Coates for bringing up this question of how Black people do live with political violence, and that we all have these stories in our family in recent history about having to flee real political violence. That's how so many of our families ended up north. My stepfather's father was accused of looking at a white woman some way, and that's why they came up from Mississippi and settled in Western Pennsylvania. Like this is the story, not in some abstraction, but in real life of so many of us. And I think part of why we are so appalled, particularly as Black people, by the idea that this sort of extrajudicial assassination is so out of the norm and un-American, and how dare you not be able to speak, as though we don't have Emmett Till as the example of what happens when you even look or are accused of looking at a white person in the wrong direction in the history of our parents' lifetimes.
But Bree, when you bring up that history, that's just too deterministic.
We're going to get into a lot more of that. I'm going to speed us up just to 1.25 or 1.5. What do you think?
Yeah, we can do that. We can let's get through it.
Let's get through a little bit more of this. Okay. Oh, sorry. I didn't put this on the screen. Okay, let's go.
You would be hard pressed to have a conversation with a Black person in this country as a descendant of it is not a thing that's really in reach in my time.
Sometimes I think that having a historical scope that wide can make the present too deterministic. So to me, I look at the last, 8, 12 years.
We need a bingo card, by the way, where every time he says that, we take a drink or something, because he comes back to this a lot. Sorry, let's go.
And what I see having happened is we, the coalition I am in, the things I believe in, lost ground. And people determinedly worked to make that so. Charlie Kirk worked to make that so successfully, right? I think that when he began going to college campuses and putting out a sign at a table, what he was eventually going to build was not obvious, right? I think he worked. I think he was a successful political actor. And I think that from when in 2016, we lost to Donald Trump the first time, very narrowly, won the popular vote, right? And then in 2020, we almost lost to him and began seeing we were losing a bunch of voters we thought we were fighting for, right? Losing more working class voters, losing non-white voters, right? Something was changing, but we won, so okay. And then 2024, we really got our asses handed to us. And we let a much more dangerous form of politics fully erupt. And I think that reflects strategic decisions they made. I think it reflects decisions we made. So I think for me, it's not enough to say we lost, their backlash is sometimes you lose. I think it requires like a very fundamental rethinking, like a disciplined strategic rethinking.
Okay, I just want to stop there for a second, because I want to be so clear. Ta-Nehisi Coates isn't saying sometimes we lose, there's backlash, it is what it is. He's saying that sometimes the factors that cause you to lose aren't because there was anything wrong with your messaging or your moral approach. And sometimes the factors that cause you to win are also out of your control. There's a revolutionary moment. Later in the podcast, he talks about how, but for World War II, and how it tarnished the idea of racial hierarchy, we might not have had the civil rights movement, right? But for Black people having gone off and fought for democracy in that war and coming home, and us having the Cold War and it being embarrassing to see Russia making fun of how we treat our Black people, we might not have had the civil rights movement. And that had nothing to do with the kind of movement strategies on the ground and the way that we glorify like Rosa Parks or whatever. And that you cannot throw away your moral, what the only thing that is constant is what you know is the right thing to do and what the right outcome is. And you don't engage in 400 years of slavery unsuccessfully ending it. And you don't engage in 100 more years of Jim Crow without successfully moving it, stopping the fight because it was unsuccessful in one cycle. You have to stay morally focused on what you want the outcome to be, so that when the opportunity emerges, you're there to act upon it.
And the thing that I come to is like the reasons why those losses happen. And first of all, who is we? Who is we? He does this a lot. Who is we that lost? You lost, Ezra Klein, because people, Kamala Harris listened to people like you. You lost. Okay. Yeah. And why did you lose? he doesn't talk about it. He doesn't really get into the details. He kind of just makes this assumption that, well, we lost to these transphobic, anti-choice bigots, so we need to, as the drill tweet says, turn the racism or transphobia dial up. But there's no this guy used to be a wonk, right? Like, he used to be like one of the nerds who was on TV pointing at the screens.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh, maybe I'm confusing him with another guy, but maybe a Steve Kornacki, maybe. But
Kornacki vibes.
But they're supposed to get into exactly why did Hillary Clinton lose. I'm
glad you brought up Hillary Clinton. This is what's about to come in this next segment. Okay, so let's get into the Hillary Clinton of it all, because I think you're right. They're very cynical. He's very cynical and selective about how he chooses this story.
Of what have we been doing? Why are people preferring this to us? And I do think that is, like, it opens up into something more, that I think that there is a practice of politics here that, in a narrow sense, I was talking about Kirk, but in a broad sense reflects to something that I thought was going to be an argument stretching across the show for like a year, right? I think more of it came out in this than I'd intended, probably. But I think in many ways we've stopped doing politics. We've written a lot of people off.
Here it is.
And
we've written a lot of people off.
We are losing, and we are unable to protect ourselves, unable to protect them, just unable to make good change in the world.
Can you say more about that, writing them off, please?
Yeah, why don't we start it here?
Please.
If we want to talk about writing them off. I've been obsessing recently for a piece I've been writing about the Hillary Clinton deplorables comment, and I want to play it.
To just be grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
We've heard this.
Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. And unfortunately, there are people like that. And he has lifted them up. He has given voice to their websites that used to only have 11,000 people. Now have 11 million. He tweets and retweets. They're offensive, hateful, mean-spirited rhetoric. Now, some of those folks, they are irredeemable, but thankfully they are not American.
What do you think when you hear that?
She probably shouldn't have said it.
Do you think it's true?
I mean, it's probably not how I would say it, but, there are things that I would say, I probably would say what I said earlier,
There are things that I would say is top notch. Okay, so we're getting into this thing where Coates doesn't, like, he understands politics. He's not naive. He knows that that's a bad thing to say. Regardless of whether it's true, it's a bad thing to say. But what's going to emerge is Klein takes from this. Hillary Clinton says half of Trump's voters are deplorable. I agree. And I wrote articles at the time about how that was such a stupid thing to say. That being said, if your job is to figure out how to win, Hillary's comment, even if true, doesn't preclude you winning, because you don't need half of Trump's voters to win. You need the other half to want to vote for you, including a whole bunch of Obama to Trump voters that ultimately are who cost Hillary Clinton the election in 2016. I'm going to push on a little bit more of that before we
interview about the force of, and I mean, as I've been saying this probably since as long as we've been talking.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I just want to be clear about something. I shouldn't be running for president of the United States. You know what I mean? And my expectations for the rhetoric of writers, intellectuals, journalists, etc., is very, very different than what the expectation should be for people who expect to hold office.
Yeah, so I agree with, right? I think that there are different jobs in all this.
Wow,
but
thank you.
When I say we begin writing people off
of him, there are different jobs that exist. He does that so many times. He agrees with the most basic thing and then glosses over the main point.
Well, what's fascinating about that one is toward the end, Coates asked him directly, like, what do you think your job is? Like, what do you think your role is? And he says, like, I don't know. And then he says that his job is persuasion. But as I sort of set up in the beginning, he doesn't think it's moral persuasion. It's persuading people in the direction he thinks is most politically effective, but not ever persuading people to agree with him and his moral precepts, which puts him constantly in this place where he's willing to throw everything overboard if there's even like the whiff of an idea that will help Democrats electorally. I'm going to do a little bit more of this clip, and then we're going to jump ahead a bit.
I think that something that happened, and I think something I saw in this debate, but kind of like underneath it, was that the work of politics, of bridging over a lot of profound, fundamental moral disagreements, I think became somewhat diminished. It began to seem like, in many cases, of betrayal to people. The tent shrunk. The people I feel more comfortable with wielding power shrunk. And I think what Clinton was saying there came from somewhere. It came from, the sort of culture that had emerged. It got worse over time. And then I think it really contributed to us losing. And meanwhile, this is why when I say, like, in that initial piece, there was something that I respected in what Kirk was doing, like going in, having debates, using them opportunistically. A lot of people throwing back at me that, he wasn't debating to find truth. Of course he wasn't debating to find the truth. He was doing politics. He was trying to persuade people. And I've watched on our side, not opportunistic engagement, but a lot of, I would say, counterproductive disengagement.
Would you like to see one of us put up a sign outside of, say, some white evangelical church in Alabama, debate me on abortion, and then use that content to say such and such smashes, church parishioner here, such and such owns church parishioner?
I would like to see.
Would you like
I would like to see people on
our
our side. Yeah, go to evangelical churches, go to places where that feel unfriendly, have conversations, and look. I put things up on YouTube. They're fairly successful, not the best of the business, and I don't use capital letters.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Leslie. Like, there's nothing precluding him from doing it, and he goes on just there to make the point that, like, yeah, he does debate people on his show, and they're across the aisle, and he doesn't use inflammatory titles, and his posts do pretty well, but it's not the same thing that Kirk was doing.
And what Kirk was doing was generating content for his YouTube channel. He was not even doing politics per se when he was, at least that part of it. It was content. It was to build up a platform. It's not politics the right way. And I just want to jump back a little bit because the way he sets it up, like with that clip of Hillary Clinton, no one thought that was a good thing for her to say. So but his theory is that somehow that was like the MO, the thinking of everyone on the left, that these are all the deplorables. We remember that clip because we were making fun of it and saying what a bad idea it is for her to say something like that.
And it was private, to be clear. It wasn't like she was on the stump speech saying that. It was like a private dinner or something, and it got out. Yeah.
But then his takeaway is that, you know what? The Democrats, instead of just not insulting the deplorables, should get more deplorable. That is his idea. It's not just we should have better orators or people who can talk to the right, like Bernie Sanders, perhaps, or have. And another thing, most people, a lot of people don't vote. Damn near most don't vote. Completely left out of the conversation. All the postmortems about why Kamala lost, why Hillary lost, when it's the number one factor. That's the people who did not vote at all because these awful candidates offer them no reason to bother. Like, so it's a completely unserious conversation to talk about, like, how are the Democrats going to win just by convincing some Republicans to vote for them on issues that the right has already delivered on. Why would a Republican ever vote for it? A pro-life Republican ever vote for a Democrat? The Republicans delivered them the Holy Grail. What are you talking about, Ezra? Why? They don't believe any Democrat who says they don't want to inject kids with transgender vaccines. At least some of the people that Ezra Klein is talking about convincing. If I go to Ezra Klein's YouTube page, I'm pretty sure I'm not seeing a ton of positive comments and feedback. He's talking about efficacy. Has this ever been he doesn't have a right winger on this week that's been like, oh, I'm coming to Jesus. I want to collaborate with you. I want to work with you. He has to have his best friend who's like trying to talk to, right? Like he has a friend to talk to and argue with. Even his friends, his circles have rejected this. He says later on, one person said, we're no longer on the same side. How is this building the tent up? Exactly.
Well, what's so interesting is that for him, the tent, he's very concerned about people coming into his tent and completely indifferent to people leaving his tent. And indifferent to what happens if he adopts a politics that chases his base away. And this is a really important point for me right now, because we're living in a world where Donald Trump is feeding his base like crazy. I'm sure you saw that insane tweet that Donald Trump tweeted out of Hakeem Jeffries dressed up in a sombrero and a mustache, and Chuck Schumer saying like fake AI generated stuff in front of the White House. And it's racist, it's insane, it's all the things, but the base loves it.
Yeah, that's
Trump
another
feeds his
thing.
base.
That's
And
another
it works
thing.
for
Like,
him.
if Donald Trump is winning because of his strategy, it's not because he's trying to appeal to liberals or gives a damn what they think
Right.
about anything. Like it makes no Ezra Klein. Nothing that Ezra Klein is saying makes any sense
It's not
unless he.
even strategically practical. It's
No.
not even strategic. Even putting morals aside, it's not even strategic. And this is such an important point. I think people need to reckon with. Zoran Mamdani won because he defended globalized the Intifada, not because he ran away from it. He ginned up his base, got 50,000 door knocking volunteers, was able to knock the dickens out of those doors and win a Democratic primary prior to doing what all the consultant class want him to do and back away from his ideological commitments. You win by ginning up the base. And
Yes.
Democrats will win. Not that, I'm advising Democrats because I don't think they'll ever do it. And I think you should support a third party. But they could win by not trying to chase the Republicans to the right. Because to your point, Leslie, they're never going to be as good as the Republicans at being Republicans. And if you are, then there's no point to being a Democrat. We just have two right-wing parties. You win by offering something that the Republicans won't offer. And the sole singular reason why Democrats don't learn that lesson and don't do that is because their donor base won't allow them to offer anything other than platitudes about identity. Which is why we don't have them running on Gaza, running on Medicare for all, running on raising the minimum wage, running on taxing the rich, or any of these deeply popular programs that are popular across the aisle, but somehow never come up in these conversations.
Facts.
All right. Speaking of Bernie Sanders, you evoked him, and now we're going to see how Ezra Klein weaponizes the existence of Bernie Sanders in this conversation. Does he bring him up in the context of Hillary Clinton saying, "Oh, well, mea culpa, I was wrong. The off-ramp when Hillary Clinton was doing that bad messaging was to support the economic populist who polled very well with independents and Trump voters and was 10 points up in every single head-to-head poll back in 2016. My bad. Bernie Sanders was that guy." No, he uses Bernie Sanders in his support of one aspect of Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2020 to gild his own reputation. Let's get into it.
Because I actually think this is a very hard thing about talking about political parties because they're diffuse, right? It's a lot of people doing a lot of things all at once. But I think of the huge backlash to Bernie Sanders for going on Joe Rogan's show because Rogan was transphobic, right? Such a big backlash that when I defended him, I became myself a Twitter trending topic. Right. To Elizabeth Warren for going on Bill Maher's show. Bill Maher's Islamophobic. Right. There were protests at Netflix when they brought on Dave Chappelle. Right. I think there was a politics of content moderation that took hold. That was more about enforcing boundaries of what, were and were not ideas we should be engaged with than about engaging with them, again, even if opportunistically. And when I go back to something I was saying to you a minute ago, I am in a process right now thinking we failed, right? We lost. The loss is having terrible consequences.
No, you failed. To your point, Leslie, you failed.
Yes. And the Joe Rogan thing let's bring this up. Who was mad about Joe Rogan? The Ezra wing of the party. That's why he had to go out there and people got mad at him. You supported the Joe Rogan thing. I certainly did because he was the biggest podcast in the world. It's sad what, I think he's gotten a lot worse since then. But the point is, Kamala Harris,
in part because of the reaction to him.
Yeah. I could talk about Joe all day, but the reason Kamala Harris didn't go on Joe Rogan is because they didn't think she would do well on Joe Rogan. It wasn't because she was afraid of any backlash. She wouldn't have got any backlash. Everybody would support it. All the people who were mad about Bernie going on would have been fine with Kamala on. It was a very cynical thing. It wasn't like actual politics behind it. Ezra must know that, right? Like he can't. He must.
Totally. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, and just again, getting why we quote unquote lost. Kamala was a terrible candidate. She has a book where she actually says like only having 170 days to get ready for a campaign. That's actually a good excuse for losing. Like Biden, Ezra wrote an article about Biden staying in the race. There's so many reasons why the Democrats lost. It's not because of, culture war stuff. that
Yep.
that Democrats are on the popular side on for the most part.
Yes. And so I'm skipping over it, but right here, Coates makes exactly that point. He says, Klein, you've argued compellingly for the fact that Joe Biden should have dropped out. That was an off-ramp without getting into any of this other stuff. As happens frequently during this interview, when Coates makes a good point, Klein just sort of moves off of it without engaging with it. I do wish Coates a few times would have said, okay, but can you just respond to what I said? Like, do you recognize that I just proved that you were wrong? And can you just like make some acknowledgement that you made a mistake? Never happens. Go ahead.
I just want to be a little bit messy. How is Coates friends with either Ezra Klein or Jeffrey Goldberg? Neither of these people seem like a good hang. Coates could hang out. I was just thinking about this. Coates is popular. He's wealthy. He is well respected. Even like racists, like on the right wing, have to say good things about Coates. Not making my point more is that he can hang out with anybody he wants in the world. If he likes Beyonce, he can grab brunch with Beyonce. There's no one in the world he couldn't have dinner with, and he spends his time with Ezra Klein and Jeffrey Goldberg. Why?
Yeah, I will say
Why?
this, like,
A public intellect, the world, one of the most foremost public intellectuals, hip, cool cat, James Baldwin comparisons. He's not hanging out with like Hollywood stars and jazz musicians. He's like hanging out with these dorks.
Yeah, I would say that the thing that would make me not want to hang out with Ezra Klein, it's not, the ideological disagreement. I disagree with someone like, Glenn Greenwald all the time, but I feel respected in our engagement when we're disagreeing about issues. I feel like my intellect is respected, my personhood is respected. I feel like we're engaging as peers, which I also really value because Glenn Greenwald is like a Pulitzer Prize winning First Amendment attorney. And I don't ever feel like he's patronizing to me or alighting the points that I make the way that Ezra Klein, even in the context of this interview, doesn't seem to be seriously engaging with Coates as an intellect. That, like, not just that we disagree. Like, I hang out with Robbie Suave. We disagree way more than Coates and Ezra Klein, but like, I'm not patronized to him in that way. And when he is, we've all heard how when I do feel like he's being patronizing, we've all heard how I pop off and did so on air. But like, that's not the nature of our relationship. And so it would be that simmering, almost what feels to me subjectively as a smug superiority that would make me not want to sort of trust him with any kind of intimate relationship. Let's bounce along a little bit. I don't remember what this next bit is about, but I put a star next to it, so I think it's important. Whoop. Sorry. Here we go.
You will eventually lose. On the contrary, I think it requires you to feel that even if you do lose, you have this kind of steadfastness. You know what I mean? To keep going.
In today's super competitive business environment, the edge goes to those who push harder, move.
Sorry. I need to pay to not have ads. I know. I'm sorry.
No, this is built in. This is built into the podcast. That one.
You're saying that's not something I can next.
Yeah, you can.
They're selling ads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Point. And I think I really saw it. In some ways more in Trump's first term, but I see it now too. Which is the worse from your perspective, my perspective, the other side gets, the more people want their reaction to sort of be, and their strategy to be emotionally consonant with how they're feeling about it.
I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
So
I think we kind of covered this point, actually. Yeah. We've been editorializing. I want to play this next clip just because I think it's the nut of Ta-Nehisi Coates' argument against Ezra Klein's sort of like, I'm going to respect the process even though I don't respect the man argument about Charlie Kirk, that I think people need to hear to really understand fully what this conversation was about, even though it's a little tangential to what we're talking about right now.
Look, I have, just in terms of bridging gaps and everything, I have a basic level of respect that I accord to everybody. You know what I mean? I want to say what I have to say. I don't want to shrink back from it. You know what I mean? But I do think on a basic level, there's a respect that has to be had for people that I disagree with, right? At the same time, I recognize that part of my audience, and I would say an important part of my audience, is people who have never enjoyed that respect. You know what I mean? People who, in fact, are subjects of the kind of hate that Charlie Kirk was harvesting. And I can't ever, A, contribute to making them feel like they've been abandoned, and B, I can't ever stand by and watch somebody do that. And in the name of unity or whatever, act like that's not happening because there are real consequences. And so it's like, when I read his words towards trans people, Jesus, when I read, you know what I mean, the language towards Haitians specifically, which was very, very, Haitians will become your masters if you don't elect Trump. I mean, this is very, very familiar to me. You know, it's this idea of Haitians coming into the country or immigrants raping your daughters. I mean, this was really, really, really dark stuff. It's at the core of this country. And so I feel like for Haitian immigrants that are in, you know, Ohio who are living under the weight of this, for trans kids who, you know what I mean, are dealing with, you know, being, I don't even want to use the term bully, beaten up, attacked, threatened. You know what I mean? It's very, very important to me, given the post I have, to say, I see you, but also this dude was wrong. And I'm all for unifying, I'm all for bridging gaps, but not at the expense of my neighbor's humanity. I just can't.
I think the thing we go to there, right? Not at the expense of my neighbor's humanity. Because I've gotten a lot of that in email, right? Like, how am I supposed to talk to these people? How am I supposed to deal with these people who are denying my humanity?
I'm not against talking to him, but I'll talk.
I just wanted to keep a little bit of Ezra's to show how he like just won't actually say anything about the kind of really emotional core of what Coach just said. What do you have to say about this clip?
I mean, it just wrote, because the thing is like, he's heard all this before. He knew all this when he wrote the first article. He made a choice. If this even cost him his friendship with Coates, he has already made that choice. He's not going to say, "Oh my God, what was I thinking? I must have been. I've had COVID a few times. Maybe I was in some sort of fog. I don't mean any of this. That's not happening. He's going to keep going in this direction, no matter what Coates says to him. He has no emotional reaction to any of what Coates is saying, and Coates is basically saying, it's like, you know, the people Charlie hated were people too, right? Like, that's basically what he's saying. And you need to consider the hurt you're causing to them with your words by ignoring the truth about this man and what he said. And we have to make very clear, like, did Ezra Klein even know who Charlie Kirk was, you know, before he is? Because he does not seem like someone that Ezra Klein would be in orbit. It seems like someone Ezra Klein would very much condemn for the type of politics he did before his recent pivot. What does this have to do with abundance? What does this have to do with cutting the red tape in government? I know it does for Ezra Klein's brand. I know the same thing that goatee that he has, the beard he's growing is doing. I see what he's trying to do, but I don't think it's going to work out for him. I really hope it backfires on him. But like, that clip is kind of the heart of it. He even used that line, not at the sake of my neighbor's humanity, as the title of the episode. It's shameless. It's shameless. He learns nothing from this conversation whatsoever with Coates. That's pretty shameful.
So in some ways, what Coates says is so obvious. Like, he's looking at the other side. It's the same way Ezra doesn't look at the people leaving the tent, only the people coming to it. Coates is like, what about the people on the other side of Charlie Kirk's rhetoric? There are people who were hurt by it, and those people are part of your coalition and your audience. And as you're bending over backward to show how reasonable and high-minded you are by being willing to like eulogize Charlie Kirk, also not seeming to have had very much exposure, to your point, Leslie, about what he actually said, or a willingness to even engage with what he actually said, you're completely ignoring the effect that has on the folks that you desperately need to have credibility with to maintain this coalition that you say is your primary priority.
And to be very clear, the people that Ezra Klein is prioritizing were the ones praying for his blood after Charlie Kirk was killed. Yeah. They wanted liberal pundits, exactly like Ezra Klein, named with names like Ezra Klein, killed, taken out. Yeah. This is what they were saying. And they believe, and some of the things coming from our government suggest that is on the way. What the fuck is Ezra Klein talking about?
Yeah,
I don't know.
So compassionate.
If he thinks this is going to keep him out of the camp, he needs to work on his pitch a little bit more, or he needs to go hardcore, shave his head, shave his head, go bald, start fixing testosterone,
Cross tattoo.
creatine.
Yeah.
You need Ezra. This ain't gonna work. This ain't gonna work for you, brother.
All right. So this like gap that we're seeing emerge, this is to me like the real, what's so interesting and so frustrating about this episode. They start to get into the nut of why they are approaching this problem differently, and it has to do with this question of what their roles are. This keeps coming up. What is our role? What is your role? What is my role? What role am I playing? Am I a pundit? Am I a politico? Am I a moral arbiter? Am I just a political vessel? So let's get into some of that.
To be very clearly.
Yeah, sure.
I have no problem with that.
I guess the place where I'm not even 100% sure if we disagree, if you just like sort of see your role differently, right? I think that in losing as badly as we have imperiled trans people terribly.
Yes.
Politics is for power.
Joe Biden did that.
Politics is for power.
Yes.
And so,
Wait, that gets lost? But God bless Coates right there, because he's like, yes, Joe Biden did that. Like, Ezra's trying to draw this connection between, he's about to make this argument that makes me want to, like, KMS. Like, because he's like, well, look, to save trans people, we have to hurt trans people. Like, Trump is really bad for trans people. So obviously whatever we do that's short of what Trump is doing to them is going to be worth it because we'll be better than them. And Coach is like, wait a minute. Biden did that. Biden's the one who lost. Biden was the one that got us here. And it had nothing to do with trans people.
Nothing.
Okay, sorry.
The assumption is that Biden or Kamala ran on some explicit pro-trans platform. That didn't happen. That did not happen.
And to be clear, I know that some people are going to say she got mollywalloped on some trans ads. That is true. But the question is that the but-for cause of Kamala's win? For example, Trump is doing 15 crazy things a day, but none of them are sticking because he's dominating the news cycle and offering up his base what they want. If Kamala Harris had like a bunch of policies coming out and say, I'm going to end the war in Gaza and I'm going to stop sending weapons to Israel and I'm going to support Medicare for all, would the media cycle have remained about trans issues? By the way, I've said this before, I'll say it again. The only reason Kamala had written down that commitment to support transitions in prisons is because they were all trying to kill Bernie. They were all trying to hurt Bernie in 2020 as the unwoke candidate. So they were all racing to be the wokest one in the field, committing to all kinds of stuff, whether or not it was politically expedient, because they wanted to be able to say, well, Bernie won't sign on to this, so you can't vote for Bernie. He's not woke enough. So there is something sort of just about them getting hoisted by their own petard in this situation.
And
the substance, go ahead.
I just want to mention very briefly, when Charlie Kirk was building up his profile, one of the things that he did was be pro-gay and pro-trans and say, I want trans people and black people and gay people in the conservative Christian movement. You can see clips of Charlie Kirk saying this before he became, very far right and rabid. So even Charlie Kirk, this guy, I don't know, had better, at least one point, political instincts than Ezra Klein did. Obviously, he built a bigger network than Ezra Klein did. What is the purpose of Ezra Klein if all he can do is eulogize Charlie Kirk? What do we need Ezra Klein for? He doesn't win. He's not going to win. He's never going to win.
Yeah.
If we're looking to win, he's not even telling us, what did Charlie Kirk do that was so good and profound, and how can we execute that exactly to win? Instead, it's just he just talks about the anti-trans stuff, which I guess Charlie Kirk did get into later on, but it's not how he built anything up. And is that how you want to build stuff up? Is that how you want to win? Apparently, the answer to that question is yes for Ezra Klein. He doesn't care. And that's just deeply disturbing to me.
And just like Coates points out later, like if you're going to do something like, say, let's throw abortion under the bus, you better have really strong evidence that you're going to win with that. And the same with the trans stuff, like just have really strong evidence at the very least that you're going to win with that. And when there's all these other gaping issues that they're unwilling to touch with a 10-foot pole like Gaza, you just have no right. I have no space to even entertain the argument that we need to start talking about trans folks. Let's keep going.
I think that the question I am just genuinely struggling with isn't how to have like a great kumbaya moment, But I think it is taking seriously that something we're doing is not working. I mean, I had Sarah McBride, who's the first trans member of Congress on the show, and we were talking about every single survey you can offer on like trans rights has gone in the wrong direction in the past couple of years, right? We've just begun to lose that argument terribly, and that has put people in real danger. So I take your point when you say, look, I want people to feel seen in my writing, and I want people to feel seen in my writing and my podcasting. But I think the place I'm trying to push towards is, I think that there is a diminishment of the political coalition building that we now need to do, because we have come to the view that a pretty wide variety of people are in some ways kind of deplorables. I think it's weakened a bit in the last couple of years.
I would never use that language. Jesus Christ.
Okay, I'm going to skip forward a little bit because I can't bear to go through that again.
I just want to point out that they're kind of talking about like the Overton window, right? And Ezra Klein, working at the New York Times, being a prominent, well-known liberal, even progressive writer, saying that I'm willing to throw trans people on the bus. That's he's actively moving the Overton window to the right.
Yeah.
He's actively causing harm. He's supposed to be the vanguard. He's supposed to be the one opening up the conversation in the other direction. That's his job.
That's your job. And that's what Coates is right here about to say he sees as his job. And I think we would agree. Here, listen.
Contest of ideas and narratives. Again, all I can go to is my role as a writer. And my role as a writer is to state things as clearly as I possibly can, to make them in such a way that they haunt, to state truths, and to reinforce probably the animating notion of my politics. And that is that all humanity is equal.
My job is to speak the truth. The animating thread of my politics is to maintain the truth, to persuade the truth that all men are created equal. That's it. And you can hear in the silence that Ezra Klein doesn't see that as his goal. And if I were to be uncharitable, I would say, may not even believe that. May not be part of his belief system.
I think he has picked a team. I don't know. I don't know what he really feels like, because it's kind of contradictory, because he's like saying, I want us to win, but then I don't want us to be us anymore so that we can win. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
I'm going to play that part just one more time, because I really, and at normal speed, because I really want people to hear this. How really the difference between Coates and Klein is right here.
Contest of ideas and narratives. Again, all I can go to is my role as a writer. And my role as a writer is to state things as clearly as I possibly can, to make them in such a way that they haunt, to state truths, and to reinforce probably the animating notion of my politics. And that is that all humanity is equal and is worthy of that, And I actually think all of the sort of political and policy positions are, that I probably find myself in sympathy with, are attempting to affect that, in the real world. And so, and again, I'm putting aside your piece, but I'm just thinking about the moment we're in. When I hear or see people who are honored and commemorated in such a way so that they almost become a national religious figure, and then I see their content, and I see that their content is actively destructive to humanity, I have to draw a line there. Like, I think, like, for me, like, the bigger question is, where are the lines? You know what I mean? And I think there's no problem with saying, listen, you can't hurl epithets at people. You're out if you do that. I'm sorry. Look, you want to have a debate about whether we should have affirmative action, in colleges? I'm here for it. You want to have a debate?
What does it mean to be on the other side of the line?
Skips over everything.
I'm sorry, what do you mean?
What is it?
Skips over everything he just said.
Yep.
To ask some really kind of nonsensical basic questions. So, like, he understands what the line is, because he's not having on, Palestinian activists on this show, right? Like, he knows what the lines are. And I wanted to point out this. If Charlie Kirk obviously said plenty of anti-Semitic things, but I think if he talked about Jewish people with the same vitriol he talked about Black people, Ezra Klein would not have written a eulogy for him. And and Ezra Klein is not saying, and this is a horrible way to phrase this, but he's not saying, okay, we need to. Well, no, actually, I'll take that back. He's not saying we need to throw Israel under the bus, right? As the thing that can help Democrats
Right.
win. Like he's not saying that. And that in
Right.
this whole context of political violence is like, who is being targeted for their speech are people who are
Yes.
criticizing Israel and being severely punished for it, losing their jobs, their livelihoods. A professor who was teaching a course on, did you see the story? A professor, Brie,
Yes.
I'm sorry. There's so much, there's so much of it. We're swimming in it.
Sorry.
It's like a fish in water. It's like a fish
Yep.
in water. You can't see it. It's everywhere. And Ezra Klein is part of that. He participates in it, as every
Yep.
writer, everyone who works for the New York Times participates in that silencing, in that erasure, in that punishment of everyone. Okay, they help. They are participants in the genocide.
Yep.
I don't know what we're talking about with Ezra Klein talking about we need to win when we need to throw trans people under the bus for it, when concretely, both morally and even cynically, Israel was a big issue, as you already mentioned.
It was the issue.
The issue.
It was the number one issue for Biden 2020 voters who declined to vote for Kamala Harris. And I want to put this, since I said that 100,000 times since that poll came out, and it's not sinking in. So let me put it a different way. You don't need to pick up a single Trump voter if all of the Biden 2020 voters vote for you, right? Biden won. He won. It might have been close. And Ezra uses this as a way to move the goalpost when Ta-Nehisi says this later. He goes, well, I don't want it to be close. So like he invalidates the fact that Biden won in 20. The point of the matter is Biden won in 2020, close or not. And that if all of those voters had voted for Kamala, Kamala would have won. So the but-for issue is, why did those voters not come through for Kamala? And the number one issue among those voters was Gaza.
Simple, obvious, which gives lie to, like, what is this podcast about? Like, that's why I would say it's kind of like it's about nothing, and you learn nothing because it's not real. I don't know how to say it. It almost feels like a simulation. Like, this is not the real Ezra Klein. He's trying, and he says constantly, like, I am doing things for a cynical political way, but none of it makes sense. So his real reasons for doing any of this must be unexpressed because I do not hear them on this show, really.
Yeah. Now we're getting to this conversation about the line, and I just want to point out to people that I wrote a piece about this in 2020 that got a lot of flack for, but holds up beautifully, if I can say. And it was called In Defense of Litmus Test. And during the summer of 2020, when the worst thing you could do in the world was be critical of the Democratic Party, even in defense of Black Lives Matter, this huge movement that was just happening, or the healthcare in the middle of a pandemic and all of the stuff that was happening, I wrote a piece out of frustration of how quickly Bernie endorsed Biden, saying that we have to stand for something. And when you stop having any kind of red line, this is obviously long before Gaza, but if you don't have any red line, you have lost your purpose. And the problem with Democrats is that fundamentally there's no litmus test, there's no floor as long as they are a hair's breadth above where the Republicans are, or at least they can make the argument that they're above where the Republicans are. And a lot of people post Gaza have woken up to the reality that you have to have some internal metric other than vote blue no matter who to guide your politics, or you enable the genocide, because there's no incentive for the Democrats to even consider not doing the genocide. And you're seeing Ezra Klein in this moment launder the choice to ignore the genocide by refusing to acknowledge that it was but for that choice that Trump is in office right now. This is so much bigger than Charlie Kirk, right? Like, I hope we can all appreciate this. Ezra Klein needs to maintain the fiction that anything else other than Gaza, and also other than Medicare for all, other than taxing the rich, other than any of the things that will be deeply destabilizing to the status quo, are the but-for causes of Donald Trump winning. Because the second that door cracks open and there's an open admission to the American public that the Democratic Party chose Donald Trump, who is fully a fascist and actively destroying democracy, there's no pussyfooting about that at this point. That they chose the world that we're living in because it was better than Nancy Pelosi being barred from insider trading, that it was better than better than keeping Mark Cuban from having to be taxed, or Jeff Bezos from having to be taxed, or having this media consolidation and all the other monopolies that are emerging that further prevent us from having any kind of diversification from which we can insulate ourselves from fascism from occurring. That the second that we acknowledge that the Democrats made this choice, everything comes crumbling down. And so Ezra Klein's job, the role that he serves, is to point widely in every direction except for the truth.
And it's so obvious because they've run these candidates before and they've lost. They've run these crappy candidates before and they lost. Where we're talking the Senate, the low levels in the South, or we're talking Hillary Clinton, who again ran a moderate campaign, explicitly so. Kamala Harris going around with Liz Cheney. What are we talking about? The Democrats aren't to the right enough. They're not conservative enough. And it's so funny because at the same time, it's like the right hates Hillary Clinton. The right hates Kamala Harris. They knew this.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so why are you
And they said that in Dearborn. They said that in Dearborn, Michigan. It's insanity. And then it's somehow our fault. Somehow it's the left's fault. Kamala, they spent the whole. Can I tell you? I went on a few dates with this human earlier this year, and he had the temerity to say to me. I said to him offhandedly in the conversation, he was like a Warren lib. I said offhandedly in the conversation, like, yeah, like the Democrats did exactly what the Ezra Kleins of the world and the Matt Iglesias of the world wanted, and they still lost. And he goes, "What do you mean that they did what they wanted? They didn't do what they wanted." And I was like, I don't understand. Is there a glitch in the matrix? I literally don't understand what's happening. It's like you just told me my head is a cabinet. Like, am I stroking out? Like, I don't understand the words that are coming out. I'm like, of course they did. Yes. He's like, no, they're always trying to push and pull, and they're liberal, and they're to the left of the party. And I was like, my brain matter is going to start seeping out of my eyes because I do not understand how you cannot understand this. Like, we are living in the world that they advise and they have wrought. And they should not have any standing to say a flipping thing, having failed the public the way that they have.
And go ahead. And they don't feel bad about it either. Coates seems to feel bad. He talks about how he went around having to endorse Kamala Harris, and he sounds generally kind of broken up about it. Like, having to. Like, he really, but it seems like he's more upset about his support for Kamala Harris, even though Ezra Klein is like essentially making the argument that we should have done everything in our power to get Kamala Harris elected. I don't think Ezra Klein did that. I don't remember him doing that much for her. Like, he says we need to win. Like, he's not that guy for the Democrats. He's not like a really he's not like a really go-getter, eager, like Kamala supporter or Hillary Clinton supporter. Like, he wants to hang back and seem like smarter and above it all, but still also be like, we need to win. And he wants to be in charge of how things are going to go, but he's like not actually going to put himself out there. He, like, in this episode, has he really said anything he believes in? Like,
no, and he takes credit, by the way, and Coates gives him credit very generously for at least being able to ring the alarm about Joe Biden. But what they don't say is that he did it in the 11th hour. If we're giving out credit, how about those of us who said he should have committed to being a one-term candidate during midterms in 2022? What about those of us who said on the air on Rising that polls showed that 75% of Democratic voters, registered Democrats, did not want Joe Biden to be the nominee before the dam even broke about his senility?
Yeah, and again, Ezra Klein, you get no credit for noticing that Joe Biden was not fit to be president. That's not political credit. That's not moral. That's not more, like, even if you noticed it early, that's not necessarily political or moral. That's just like mechanical. Like, he was sick and he should not have been president. That's not like that doesn't make you any kind of a person. Like, that's just common sense. The fact that everyone pretended otherwise that says a lot about them, but it says very little about you, except you're just kind of honest.
Yes, I'm pulling down my copy of Original Sin, but by my neighbor on the other side of this wall here.
Oh, goodness.
Yes, another thing. It's like it's too little. I mean, it's too late. But at least now we
Yes.
have a record of it. And again, there's no accountability. The DNC. I've said this, but I got to keep saying it. Go back, listen to every time during the DNC chair election, someone brought up Joe Biden's cognitive decline and whether or not the bell should have been rung earlier and the cover up. They all say the same thing. We're looking forward, not backward. Jamie Harrison, even Marianne Williamson, who I had on the show and gracefully took questions about it, but like they all said, I'm going forward. We're looking forward, not backward. It became like this weird children of the corn ass mantra. Like, why? How are you possessed? Like, what is happening? We're going forward, not backward. Because there was the line is there will be no accountability within the Democratic Party. Okay, sorry. Let's push on a little bit more.
Once somebody's on the other side of the line,
Right.
what does that mean for you?
For instance, once you think it's okay.
No.
Yeah, I'm trying to make this concrete.
Yeah, no, I am too.
Yes.
Once for whatever the definition of the line is,
Right.
What does it mean for you for somebody to be on the other side of it? Right, not somebody who just died,
Right.
but somebody still living.
Right. If you think it is okay to dehumanize people, then conversation between you and I is probably not possible.
And so, what do you do with the fact that so many people think that is okay?
I think what you try to do is again, this is the difference, right? Like, I don't necessarily have the crystal ball to say that in this time, I'm going to be able to convince a majority of people that, for instance, let's just take the thing that's hot right now. Trans folks are human beings and deserve humanity. Although I think most people know that you shouldn't say what he said. Like, that shit is rude. It's just rude to talk to people like that. And I think most people know that. So as I'm thinking my way through the question, I actually think that's not a hard line to draw. I think not calling people out of their name, I think that's actually a basic value that most people have. And I think people who think it's not, who are pushing that, are actually themselves on the other side of the line.
But so I want to hold on this for a minute, because I do think this is like a very
and that's
core
different
question.
from policy, Ezra.
Yeah, I understand it's different than policy.
That's different than policy.
Whoa.
I think that
He's taken that tone with him before. That's that. I'm getting tired of you, Ezra tone.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but I find this discussion of the line and the fact that it's very important to Coates that he has one. He's like, I don't know all the answers. I don't know what to do with the people who are on the other side of it, but I know that I have one. And having a moral compass is fundamentally what's important, because that's the place from which I argue. That's the place from which I do my job. That's the place from which I play my role. And Ezra can't really engage in that. He sees the fact that there are other people, there are people that he needs to persuade on the other side of the line. And his response is to say, well, maybe I've drawn the line in the wrong place. Maybe let's erase the line. Maybe I hop to the other side of the line, which shows a fundamental lack of confidence in your own ability to persuade and for that line to be permeable, and which is the opposite of fatalistic. It's the opposite of deterministic, which is the charge that he keeps putting to Coates.
And Coates, I think, immediately after this points out that he's not telling the truth about, not having, like, he has a line. Ezra Line has a clear line for certain people, just not for Charlie Kirk. And
should we get into that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wonder's reality is the president of the United States is a person who, in his comportment as a human being on the public stage, I would have said in 08, in 12, in 16, should be on the other side of the line.
Yeah.
I think he's a person who does not act with any sense of public or even personal decency.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he won in 16, lost sort of narrowly in 20 and then won in 2024. And I think the thing that has led to for me is recognizing that I don't get to draw the line. Now, it doesn't mean I don't have it in my own
you
heart,
do for yourself.
but I think that
You didn't have to vote for Donald Trump. Lots of people drew the line and said no to Donald Trump, even though he won the election. What are you talking about?
Yes. And by the way, he takes credit for being part of the movement that convinced Biden to step down. And so you have the persuasive capacity to make an impact. But for Ezra and George Clooney and the pod saves all turning on Joe Biden, I don't know that Joe Biden would have dropped out. He lost the confidence of the public, in large part because Ezra Klein defines where the public confidence lies. But he will abdicate that responsibility and blame it on pragmatism. But if you listen to this, I'm sorry, I draw the conclusion that he abdicates the responsibility because he doesn't actually believe in the line himself. And so both he and Coach throughout this are like, well, certainly you have a line. Certainly you have morals. Of course you have morals and you have your own litmus test, Ezra. I don't have confidence that that's true. And I think that the way Ezra behaves betrays a lack of confidence within himself that that is true.
That is the thing that I am struggling with, which is not only is he clearly for most people, or a lot of people, plurality of the voters in the last election, not somehow way over the line, but like that means it's a lot of people who are willing to accept things that I thought we would have found unacceptable. Like if you had told me, like I would have thought that the way he acts in public is unacceptable, and it's not. And so
the way he acts in public, to be clear, not genocide,
Not that.
not cutting Medicaid, not even
Not
something
that.
policy centered, not attacking colleges, the DEI pogrom, not
You
endlessly
think
funding
Ezra would be
police
really
departments, not
mad about the
environmental
college
crimes.
thing? You think Ezra would be really pissed about? Well, I guess because of why it's happening, maybe it's not so much. But
Right.
yeah, it's a strange thing to pretend that like people hate Donald Trump and Ezra Klein. Your job, I think a lot of people thought, was to be writing about how evil Donald Trump was. If I'm being honest with you, I bet that's what a lot of people thought you would be doing. So why? I don't know why this change up.
It's a lack of confidence that his perspective could be winning because it's right.
And I've seen so many people, like a lot of people were broken by Kamala losing, even though it was obvious that she would. Like a lot of people have pivoted since then. I guess it's the line, how many years we've been in Gotham for how many years, Bree? You know, we've seen a lot of good guys come and go. How many good guys are left? It seems like a lot of people, and you're one of the few people who has not. And I just want to take a moment to thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say, but I will also credit that there are a bunch of libs who've broken left instead of broken right. Like those, the Blonde Housewife podcast that just had Hassan Piker
Oh,
on.
yes.
There are a bunch of angry libs who they don't have the words and they don't have the politics and they don't have the sort of analytical framework to really understand why the Democrats are being so feckless. That's this book that I'm supposed to be writing right now. But to give them that foundation, but they instinctively know that the Democrats are supposed to be doing something other than what they're doing now, and that they're not fighting and they're not resisting. And so there are these people who have a newfound willingness to criticize the Democratic Party and see them as part of the problem, which I think is a really important thing to acknowledge for us as leftists, then to capitalize on and to say, okay, like come in, the water is warm.
The only thing I worry about is they don't like the Democrats because they're losers. Right, like some of them, they don't like the Democrats because they're losers, and so they're going to want to win. Sometimes some of those people are going to want to win sometime soon, and they may make the same calculation that Ezra Klein is making eventually. Right. Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Right. Well, that's our job. That's why we got to get in there and be screaming. Giving up on abortion isn't actually going to win you votes, no matter what Neera Tanden tells you. She co-signed that, by the way, if you didn't see her tweets.
Oh, goodness.
All right. Pushing through a little bit more. I'm going to get through a little bit of a hunk of this because this is really the meat and potatoes.
I think for me, and this goes back to maybe the culture that you feel didn't exist, but I feel did, that there was a view that we could sort of work with politics with drawing these lines, that there are people going to be inside them and outside them, and we could work that way. And I think that I am like working with the question of what happens if you don't believe that, if you don't control the line. What I see is any line that existed at all collapsing.
Sorry, I just want to say one other thing about controlling the line. What happens if you do not control the line? That is such a misunderstanding of what a line is. Your job isn't to control the line for other people. It is to have a line for yourself and to argue for where the line should be. Your job is to argue for where the line should be, not to control the line.
But that's exactly what he's doing is saying that the line should be somewhere in front of Charlie Kirk. That's basically what he's saying. He is saying, yes, this, in a very roundabout way, we need to move that line to include Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump and everybody in it.
Yes.
I don't know what else to say.
And that, I think that exactly what you just said, the kind of moral vacuity of what Ezra is saying right now is why it prompts Ta-Nehisi to bring this back to race right now in a way that it's very effective, but is very irritating if you're a white liberal like Charlie Kirk. I'm sorry, like Ezra Klein. I keep doing that. They both have the same rhythm to their name, Ezra Klein, Charlie Kirk. Okay.
So I'm watching like Holocaust revisionism on like the biggest right-wing podcasts, right? I'm watching Tucker Carlson like turn into, what I would describe as a white nationalist and become an absolute dominant force on the right, like bigger than he ever was in his, smarmy libertarian phase. And this stuff is real appeal, like as you said, right? That's not a surprise on some level. It's just something you have to deal with. And so that's where this question of the line drawing, like I have lines of what I think should and should not be acceptable, but those lines clearly have no relationship to my country, the politics. And I think I've been asking the question without really having an answer. I want to be honest about this. Well, what follows from that?
I think you do have a line. I think
I'm sure I do.
I think there are things, for instance, that I could say that would make you say it's no point in Ta-Nehisi coming up and being on this podcast. And likewise, there are things you could say. Obviously, I would say it's no point in me talking to Ezra.
Yeah. I'm thinking, what happens if 35% of the country,
I think we know exactly
the
the
dominant
type of
political force in the
thing
country is inside that? Does that change it?
Gaza. It's the thing he doesn't mention.
Yes.
Right? He's like, oh, I'm seeing anti-Semitism. I'm seeing all these horrible things that are acceptable in society. The fact that genocide is acceptable as a bipartisan effort doesn't even cross his mind. And so he's living in a world where he's willing to accept the worst crime in humanity happening before him, being precious about somebody else being anti-Semitic. I'm sorry. The idea that you are being so rattled by quote unquote rising anti-Semitism in a world where a self-described Jewish state is committing a genocide and you don't even think to say that out loud says to me, you have no moral high ground. Maybe the right has been willing to cross these lines because the liberals have made no effort to have any moral credibility whatsoever.
I've stuck on him talking about, I'm watching these right-wing podcasts do anti-Semitism. I'm watching, who he mentioned, Bowtie Guy, Tucker Carlson show.
Yeah.
When he's watching this stuff, I don't know if he's condemning it. It sounds like he's picking up on their vibes. That's why he has the goatee. He is pivoting and branding like them. Like that's why he watches them, because he also started a video podcast and this is his new thing after, I don't know why they put out Abundance. Did they think a Democrat Kamala was going to be president when they put out Abundance and he was going to get made, I don't know what, HUD secretary or something?
Secretary, yes. I mean, HUD secretary always has to be a black person. LOL. Yeah. That's where they ghettoize the black cabinet member.
But
Go ahead. Sorry.
Like, this is all part of like a pivot, and this is kind of, he doesn't really get into on the show, but this is kind of the peek into what's really happening here. Is like he says this is all really successful. And I think he's trying to copy that in some way, trying to get in on that. I mean, he did have Ben Shapiro on this show a couple of episodes
immediately after the Charlie Kirk did Politics the Right Way episode. He had Ben Shapiro on. Now, he recorded that episode beforehand, before Charlie Kirk died and before he wrote that op-ed, he said.
So,
but it was still incredibly tone deaf.
So he recorded that before Charlie Kirk's death, right?
Yes.
So again, Ezra Klein is another one of these people who, when Charlie Kirk died, saw a really, really good opportunity for content and brand building.
Yeah.
A path he was already on. Perfect. And that's I don't really care about Charlie Kirk, but it is kind of gross to see how naked and blind the opportunism is from top to bottom. And no one is talking about it. If you're talking about decorum and where lines are drawn, like I guess Ezra is kind of arguing the opposite, but there has been a lot of discussion about how we talk about someone when they're dying. And he did start off with, I don't want to bother grieving people. What do we say about this?
Let me get some clicks off it.
Yeah. What do we say about this? Let's get some clicks off it. I don't understand why he even write that article. He's not. Would you want someone whose ideology, even if you're does he think that the people who loved Charlie Kirk want someone named Ezra Klein of the New York Times eulogizing
Yeah,
it?
let's talk about because I see someone in the comments who was like, but Ezra Klein's Jewish. He obviously doesn't want there to be, he doesn't want to be like the Third Reich ascendant. And I want to respect that. Like, I think that that's right. I think the envy is for the sort of prominence and success of the right-wing podcast, not necessarily the content. And obviously there is a willingness to go to the right, but I want to complicate this a little bit more, because some people have been saying like, well, he's Jewish, and Charlie Kirk did say anti-Semitic things, and therefore, he does have a dog in this fight. I understand it a little differently. And I've seen this with certain kind of model minority stuff that happens that is racist, but racist in a different way than anti-Blackness, anti-immigrantness, etc. Charlie Kirk and people of his ilk believe that Black people are inferior, intellectually inferior, morally inferior, more violent. They make these arguments constantly. This is not a controversial statement. This is not slander. This is what they believe. Now, I have been saying this since Charlie Kirk died, and folks have been in my reply saying, yes, so what? I've been quoting Charlie Kirk, and people have, as evidence, these things as evidence of his racism and bigotry, and people in the comments have been saying, okay, so what? That's just true. It's not racist. This is the difference between how people talk about Black people and how people talk about Jewish people. There are a lot of anti-Semitic Zionists. There are people who, think that, Jews are a secret cabal and owning the world and all of this kind of stuff, and yada, 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 who think they have horns in their head and you don't care about them and all that stuff. But they don't believe that they are intellectually inferior, morally inferior, physiologically inferior, like just inferior as human beings, less human, less worthwhile. They don't like them, but it's not a supremacy movement. And it's the same thing they'll do with Asians. They'll say, well, I can't be a racist because I admit that Asians are smarter than me and doing better than me. And so it doesn't, I think there's a difference when you are the victim of a supremacy movement. And people like the same argument was happening with Glenn Greenwald, who was saying a little bit of the stuff like, I think that Charlie Kirk was nice interpersonally and he treated people well who knew him. And I responded like, I met him and I did not feel that way. And some people were like, well, Charlie Kirk was anti-gay and he was anti-Jewish, and Glenn Greenwald is Jewish and gay. So if Charlie Kirk was going to treat you poorly, he would have treated Glenn Greenwald poorly too. And I'm like, no, there's a difference. He might not like gay people. He might think that they are immoral in their sexual preferences. He might think that Jewish people are not right in the eyes of God and aren't practicing the right religion. And they might even think that they are nefarious with their business dealings or whatever. But he does not think that they are inferior as human animals on the chain, on the hierarchy. And I felt when you are dealing with someone like that, when you are a Black person and you look into someone's eyes and you're interacting with someone and you know that they see you as fundamentally less than, and there's something that you can say or do, they're going to believe they won every argument they ever had with you, because they cannot, first of all, they're very stupid. A lot of white supremacists are just, you're very stupid, but they don't even have the intellect, and they certainly don't have the morality to understand your point of view, that you could ever be right to entertain you in any kind of seriousness, because it's like for them, they're arguing with a dog. And maybe you've not experienced that because you don't belong to a group that's perceived that way, but I know what that feels like. And I know what that looks like. And I know every time, we've all seen this on the internet, where someone says, well, I don't understand why that was racist. And then you just plug in a different race and then suddenly everybody can see how it's racist. This happens with Palestinians all the time, by the way. That's part of why I have such a strong feeling of kinship and respect for them, because it's like echoes of what we've been going through. The way that, any old politician, Randy Feiner, whomever, can get up there and say, Palestinians die in a dog like a ditch, we're going to blow up your houses, human animals, all the horrible things have been said about them for the last 2 years. And Republicans be like, whatever, it's a war, it's not a big deal. Put Jewish in there. My last radar, by the way, before I got fired, the day before, and this is why I think I was actually fired. If you go back and watch that radar, what I did, how I opened it, was I took a quote from the last Bill Maher episode where he was talking about Palestinians in the Islamophobic way that he does. And I just changed every time he said Palestinian or Arab to Israeli and Jewish. I just switched the words out. And it sounded racist as hell. It said an anti-Semitic as hell. And it was like, woo. And of course, right after I said, now, of course, that was inappropriate sounding, but that's exactly what he said about Palestinians. And I think that's why I was fired, to be honest. I think it was the radar, not what happened the next day in that interview. Because they can't stand like that reality. People confronted with the reality of how deeply bigoted they are. It's just not tolerable.
And Bill Maher has years, decades of saying offensive things about Muslims and Palestinians. And, you know, like who gets kicked off the air and who doesn't? You know, that's a big thing. Like these bizarre double standards that Ezra Klein upholds himself, that he doesn't call out. Like he works for the New York Times. He knows everything that we've said on the show. His own friends send him emails. His Gmail was blowing up. All those the internet and, you know, in those brownstones was probably slow as hell because they were all emailing Ezra about how mad they were. So he heard all this before. Hasn't moved, hasn't changed one bit, hasn't learned a damn thing. That shows the level of lack of respect he has for Ta-Nehisi Coates as a black man. Yes. As you were just talking about it, that's what I felt watching this show. Yes. The disrespect he has for Coates of having these substanceless pivots from everything Coates says, where he takes nothing he says seriously. Like that in and of itself shows the lack of respect he has for black people, because Coates specifically talks about the historical suffering of black people, and Klein is just like, that's too heavy, man. I can't deal with all that shit.
Yes, we're right there at that point, by the way. So let me let the audience into what you and I know all too well is about being said, because we masochistically have already watched this. All right, let's get into it. Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting I've taken that off. Okay.
Like the line just holds.
No, I mean, welcome to Black America. That's our history. The line we have drawn in general has not been majoritarian politics, unfortunately. That's just been what it is, you know? And at the times that it's been majoritarian politics, people have done things and, you know, fiddled with government or done, you know, extremely violent things to make it not so, you know?
How do you deal in that answer? Like, how do you deal with Trump really substantially increasing his share of the black vote?
For Christ's sake, the way that's not the point. Like, Coates says, as a black person, I can't do majoritarian politics because that would have meant me conceding that I'm allowed to be a slave, that I'm allowed to be a second-class citizen, because most Americans, for most of American history, did not agree that I was equal. And in response to that, Ezra Klein goes, okay, but what about the fact that Trump is getting more black votes?
Again, if it's about votes, you can talk about non-voters. You don't have to worry about the handful of, I don't know, people just like Trump more than Kamala. That's not even like a mystery. Like Coates goes on to explain, well, it doesn't surprise me that such and such percent of black men are conservative. Doesn't even have to get there. Like she just wasn't that popular. She just wasn't that well liked.
Yeah, well,
and Bree audience, I'm sorry, my pup Jackson is going wild. I think I have to take him out for a bit, if that's okay.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I can hold down the ship for a little bit and maybe speed through some of this if you're just going to be a few minutes.
Oh, and I already watched it, so I won't need to catch up on anything. So I'll be able to jump right back in. If I'm back. If I'm not back, thank y'all so much in time for the end of the show. Thank y'all so much. Struggle session show, but hopefully I'll be right back. All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'll advertise struggle session for you at the end if for some reason you don't come back.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's power through, gang.
Actually, I think where he is about where actually Republicans tended to be before Barack Obama. So I'm a little less. I mean, there's a conservative portion of our community that's always voted Republican. And I think, you know, obviously I think sexism is a very, very real force. You know, I don't think it's completely explanatory, but the idea that there is, say, 20% of black men who are fundamentally conservative, that doesn't really surprise me too much.
But I guess let's take, because I think this is a hard case. I think from your perspective and from my perspective, we probably don't believe hugely different things. Mm-hmm. A huge amount of the country, right? A majority of the country believes things about trans people, about what policy should be towards trans people, about what language is acceptable to trans people, that like we would see as fundamentally and morally wrong.
I'm going to skip ahead for a second, but I'm going to say something maybe somewhat controversial here, but in both directions. I think it is a disservice to all parties involved to talk about like trans issues in a big umbrella, because it is putting Democrats in a position where they feel like they have to concede on like all trans issues, because there is a narrow, Ezra's right about the narrow issue of trans women competing in sex segregated sports with cis women, right? That is the thing that is broadly unpopular, and I think is the only cognizable argument in the grand trans discourse. But as I pointed out in a tweet today, the overwhelming majority of anti-trans legislation, they've tried to pass almost 1,000 bills, and 122 of them have successfully passed. And those are about what you're allowed to wear, what you're allowed to say, education, and like more substantive rights, right? And so when people are having these broad conversations about like trans issues not being popular and needing to backtrack on them, I would say two things. I would say, one, distinguish what you're actually talking about, and two, make sure you do that so that you can actively make a case for the other popular aspects of trans rights, and don't leave the door open for Republicans to trample all over them, because you also have the ability to persuade. And if the Democrats were talking in the way that Coates is right now about saying simple things like trans people have a right to live, trans people have rights to basic protections, Republicans are imperiling those rights and those protections, then we might be able to see some polling shifting in favor of sympathy toward trans people more broadly, instead of them being able to be turned into the stalking horse Republicans have turned them into. Okay, I'm going to hop forward a little bit to this point at the 41-minute mark, where Ta-Nehisi Coates starts making this argument about making political compromises in order to win. Historical examples other than slavery and Black stuff, because Ezra Klein says, well, that's too fatalistic. I don't like talking about that. Coates says, okay, what about FDR? That's another example.
This feels like a very salient question. The Republican Party is going to make sure this is a relentlessly salient question.
Right.
So
I agree with that.
where does the approach leave us? Right? Where do we go on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. Look, I think a couple things. I think, again, look, my tradition is the only thing I have a reference point for, so I'm sorry to keep going back to this. But when I look at the times that we have lost, if I think specifically about the Black tradition, for instance, it's hard for me to say politically they did something wrong. You know what I mean? Like Reconstruction falls. What was the thing that should have been done? On the contrary, I see, you know, a kind of courage that I wish we had today in a lot of people. You know what I mean? I see people willing to die and take bullets all the time. You know what I mean? What more could Ida B. Wells have done, you know, to get the anti-lynching bill passed? I mean, here is somebody that, you know, was banished from Tennessee on threat of being killed after she saw her friends, you know, murdered and lynched. And one of the things I will say is, when I look back at that long tradition, and I look back in the times that people have won and the places they've won, it's often not been their heroism that was the decisive factor ultimately. It's often not been their strategy that was the decisive factor. Folks look back at the civil rights movement, for instance, and they talk about how brilliant it was to do the sit-ins and, you know what I mean, use mass media in the way that Martin Luther King used mass media, the appearance, all of that's true. But if we don't have World War II, you know what I mean, and the planet does not get a view of how horrific it can be when you decide you're going to eliminate people based on their traits, civil rights movement happened? I don't know. I think windows open and close. And so I think some of this is up to the decisions that politicians make. I think some of it is also up to what's happening in the broader mass culture at the time. I think all this kind of, you know, works together. I'm not against, you know, this kind of strategizing. I think that has to happen. But I think you also have to recognize like how broad the world is when you say politics.
In today's super competitive business.
Okay, we're going to hop ahead. Welcome back, Leslie.
I'm
going to hop ahead. Yeah,
I do want to
please.
note that the only ad built into this is that one T-Mobile ad. And Ezra Klein has had this show for a while, so he's not pulling in the sponsors like I would have expected. Where's the Blue Chew?
What I'm skipping ahead is because we already kind of talked about this, that he offers up these civil rights examples and says, World War II, all this other stuff, but for that, we might not have had the gains. And therefore, and I want to be really clear about that, what Coates is saying is, therefore, these failures and setbacks, it's not fatalistic in me saying this, is quite the opposite. Sometimes there's very little of it that was within our control. Like the successes weren't in our control and the failures weren't within our control. And so that is no excuse to give up on your values and what you're fighting for, right? And Ezra Klein basically is like, oh, I don't like the examples that you're giving of the Civil War, because ultimately we had the tipping point. We had the war. It didn't get resolved politically. It got resolved violently.
And what have you learned from that, Ezra? What have you learned from that? Ezra, because there were Ezra Kleins back then.
Mm-hmm.
Dozens of them across the country writing in newspapers, the types of things that you write, the historical equivalency.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to go to war. And a lot of people had to die for things to change because things were that serious. And if you don't understand the stakes, you don't understand that. You don't understand, like Ezra Klein doesn't want to think about that. We talk about the Civil War because people like Ezra Klein were not able to stop it from happening with their words and the kumbayas and what have you, and the sophistry. Didn't work. There was too much going on, too much serious shit going on, too many people already dying and suffering.
I really like that you used the word "the I think that's a really good way to also look at the difference between these two men, because you can tell for Coates, the stakes are really high. They feel very personal and very real. And when Klein is asked, like, what is motivating him, what his role is, at some point, I think it hasn't happened yet, he basically says, like, I would like to be able to explore my curiosity and my ideas. Like, that's what his role is, to like to play with ideas on the internet. I mean, like, God bless, like, sometimes I do movie reviews. We all play with ideas. You do a culture podcast, Leslie, but like, that's what we're talking about right here. Like, we're talking about a man who was murdered, and we're talking about your response to that. And we're talking about a potential, like, cultural and maybe real civil war that's breaking out and the end of American democracy. So it's time to get serious. So I'm skipping ahead to after Ezra Klein says, I don't really like your examples because we had a civil war. And Coates says, bet. How about FDR?
Let me give you an instance that often also comes up. That's not the Civil War, and that's the New Deal, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think there is a pretty strong argument that the New Deal not a strong argument, but pretty clear that the New Deal did quite a bit to create the social safety net, expand, create an American middle class, right? That's true. Did FDR want to, in his heart, exclude Black folks in the way that they were excluded from it? No. That was the price of getting the thing done. I understand that as politics. But were I there in that time, it would be incumbent on me to yell at FDR to not do that. Mm-hmm. I just think that's really, 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 really important. We don't all have the same role. You know, when I wrote Case for Reparations, it was not my expectation, nor did I even think it would be politically intelligent.
I got to pause it there. Coates says, I understand political expediency, but my job is not to gild political expediency. My job is to make sure that the moral valence is clear. My job, if I were alive during FDR's time, even if I understand why he made the compromises he made, is to try to encourage him not to make those compromises.
What I think about is this. It's like, okay, FDR, Coates says that was the price of getting it done, kind of throwing Black people under the bus at the time. I'm going to push back on Coates just a little bit. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't.
Right.
We ended up here. We ended up here where we are now.
Excellent point.
So whatever FDR got done was not good enough by a damn lot.
Yes.
So we don't need to look back and celebrate that was the price to get it done. Apparently, we have made a lot of wrong choices to get here, all the way down. Okay.
Yes.
This is why the historical perspective is important. But you also have to understand that history led us all here to all of these problems. Okay. Maybe we need to look at the losers, because the winners have destroyed the planet. I don't know how else to put it. The winners have killed billions of species of animals. It's gone. The environment destroyed. COVID, deadly virus. That's it. It's extremely dangerous. Spread. Everyone has it. Everyone already has it. I think the winners have been wrong a lot. I think the winners are people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. And this is something that Ezra Klein doesn't like get into. It's like, who are the actual winners of our world? And it's the capitalists, it's the ultra wealthy. These are not good people. These are horrific people. These are evil people, top to bottom. I don't know what Ezra Klein is talking about. that we are just going to win over some of their supporters by saying we're just going to be almost as bad as them. I don't think that's going to happen.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm going to skip ahead another 5 minutes or so because I think we've summarized that exchange a bunch before we actually got to it. And let's hop in here around the 55 minute mark.
Yeah, I do it because sometimes you need the reminder. What I hear you saying in a way is we are of the nature too.
Yeah.
And I think the place I'm trying to push is then how then shall we live? Because in this distinction you're making between like you would have been there correctly yelling at FDR. And I'm not like asking you, but like me, right? Like my work, my role.
Can you answer that? Can you say what you, I think it's a good point. Would you define for me how you see like what your role is?
I don't know what my role is anymore. I'll be.
Boom. I'm going to slow it down because like, this is an important part. Okay. I don't know what my role is.
Totally honest with you, man. I feel very conflicted about that question. The role I want to have is a person curiously exploring his political and intellectual interests in political peacetime.
Okay, he does say in political peacetime, in all fairness. He wants to be able to just like intellectually masturbate in peacetime. But now we're in wartime, bucko.
Okay, first of all, there's a couple of things, like the political peacetime thing. At what point in human history do you think Coates would say there has ever been such a thing?
Excellent point.
There's never been such a thing as a political peacetime. Nonsensical.
Maybe for white landowning men.
Yes, and he can have that. He has that now. He has that now. Aside from dinner parties, I guess that he's getting grilled about probably Gaza at.
It's no longer civil.
Yes, and another thing is like clearly he's talking like he wants to be Joe Rogan. That's literally what he says. I want to just explore my curiosity. That's what Joe Rogan does. Explore his curiosity on a podcast that has no stakes and no meaning. I'm like, Ezra, you already have that job. you already are making yourself completely irrelevant with this, strange, bizarre pivot. Except we get to make fun of it a little bit. Coates made the show relevant, but I think if he keeps going that, like, remember Gavin Newsom tried to start a podcast, kind of similar vibes,
and had conservatives on. Like, what was Charlie Kirk? Am I making this up? It wasn't Charlie Kirk, but it was somebody like him that was the first guest.
Yeah, I think maybe it was Ben Shapiro too, but
yeah, and he said his son loves Charlie Kirk, and Ezra cited that. Ezra cited the fact that Gavin Newsom's son loves Charlie Kirk in his eulogy.
Okay, so that says a lot about how Gavin Newsom is raising his sons, because there's this big moral panic, right, about kids and cell phones. Charlie Kirk is one of the men who made it unsafe for your child to have a cell phone, right? Like, he's the one pointing out content for kids, hateful content for kids to watch. Like, his videos were aimed at young people. I don't know why this hasn't really come up. Like, when we talk about, like, there's been so much talk about how do young men get radicalized?
That's why he was on the college campuses. That's why. One, because that's the only people who can be in a debate.
The guy that you've all been complaining about. That's him. That's him.
Yeah, 100%.
And I have to say, as a former middle school teacher, a lot of kids are into this, and that says a lot about how crappy and unintellectual the content was, how meaningless it was. And for Ezra Klein to spend his time praising this, it's like praising someone who wrote, I don't know, really horrible, like a famous, prominent, the New York Times, like, literary critic praising like a really awful, like, YA author who writes like racist books, like, I don't know. It's like,
it's like saying 50 Shades of Grey is great literature because it was popular. Like I've not read it. Maybe it's okay as a fun read, but we don't. No,
it's terrible. It's terrible. But that's even insulting to her, because it was actually mainstream popular in a way that Charlie Kirk was not. He was an astroturfed, marginal figure. So Ezra Klein is elevating this kind of obscure racist. I mean, he had a lot of followers, but in a lot of ways, he wasn't known in a lot of circles like Ezra Klein's circles. He probably wasn't
Right.
invited.
I mean, you can tell from what Coates says that he like had to look him up. Like he had a passing familiarity with him, but he wasn't that familiar with him, which is another level of why the eulogy and all of the hand waving about Kirk was a problem. All these liberals who were rushing to give their condolences really gave the sense that he was a bigger, more mainstream, more influential, and more important figure than he actually was, and helped to push his ideas and give his ideas more legitimacy. They give him legitimacy, and by extension, his ideas. Ezra did that. They all did that.
And I don't, of all the things and people to hitch your wagon to, especially to do it, and it's risky too, right? Because again, we didn't know why this happened. We didn't know the motive. This could have been anything. Bree, you've seen SVU, right? Before Law and Order, the twists and the turns of rip from the headline stuff. We still don't know where this is going. So to immediately say, I'm going to hitch my wagon with somewhat a controversial figure who was murdered, that's taking a chance because you don't know what's going to be coming out. What is about this person? It's a strange thing to do. And I don't know why Ezra, I guess because he had done that Ben Shapiro interview already. Like this was the perfect time.
I mean, I do think it's bigger than that. I do think it's to your other point, your earlier point about being jealous of sort of the platform, being jealous of the reach, being jealous of being popular with people outside of the New York Times bubble. Look, as a content creator, there's a part of me that sort of understands a sort of resentment of people who are bigger and more famous than you. But when I see people who are in that position whose values don't align with mine, I'm like resentful, but I don't want to be them. Like I want to have their platform, I want to have their reach, but I don't want to morph myself into them because then what is the point? And my frustration with Ezra is that fundamentally he is willing to compromise more of himself to have success, to do politics the right way, but meaning to have that reach, even if it's at a great deal of cost to his substantive politics.
And the thing is, I guess I'm kind of dissing Ezra Klein, but we got to be honest about this. There's several thousand journalists, writers who would like to be in the position that Ezra Klein is in, who maybe deserve it more than he is. He doesn't think it's enough, and he's willing to sell out marginalized people. So greedy. To get more. Like there's so many journalists who have lost their job. The industry has collapsed, and this guy gets his abundance book. He's got that money coming in, and he's working for the New York Times, and he's got this new podcast. They're trying to make him the Joe Rogan of the left. Like, what is he complaining about? What is going so bad for him that this is what he needs to pivot to? He could be doing the show about anything. He could have Coates on to talk about anything. Yeah. If Coates and Ezra Klein talking, it still would have gotten a significant amount of views without this being the Charlie Kirk stuff. He could have had Ben Shapiro on just to call him, just to debate him or to own him. Like Coates makes the point. Coates makes the point that, okay, if Charlie Kirk is doing this and he won, you can do this. Why you don't have to compromise with them? Why don't you do videos owning them? He doesn't explain why he doesn't want that. Ezra Klein never explains why he doesn't actually want a Charlie Kirk of the left for some reason.
That's such a good point. And the thing about this debate about like, should I platform people often gets off the rails. The point is, if you're going to have someone on, challenge them on their ideas. And what's so frustrating about the Ben Shapiro thing is not like having him on, the fact that you don't engage him substantively. And I believe that if Ezra Klein had Charlie Kirk on, they would have talked about the process of interviewing kids or debating kids on college campuses and never once mentioned what Charlie Kirk stood for, just like he failed to do that in his eulogy. All right.
And the role I somehow have is sometimes that. But I am in the business. I'm a political opinion writer and podcaster and so on. And I'm in the business of political persuasion. And I feel like me and the people who believe what I believe, not narrowly speaking, but, like the whole broad coalition, have failed in a really consequential way. And I think it
You
is.
feel like you failed in your work.
I think there are places I failed. I mean, I think there are things I got right too. Like I think we shouldn't have run Joe Biden again. I think I was right about that. I think I've gotten a lot right, but I think I've gotten definitely things wrong. But I think we are here now, right? That's what I would really say. And
The way he pivoted off of that so quickly. Hey, look, we're here now. Hey. Sure, I failed. Yeah, a little false humility, but like, yeah, we're here now. Let's look forward, not backward. Let's look forward, not backward.
It's like, what has Ezra Klein convinced people of? What's been his case, his crusade?
To move
that
to the right.
He cares about, like, even this isn't even, I don't even know if this is working, because I think, Coates coming after him kind of makes it a bad look to side with Ezra Klein. Even if you're inclined to side with him, I don't think this podcast really made him look good. Most of the comments I saw were not positive towards Klein here.
No,
and
he was getting dragged.
Yeah, and he doesn't seem prepared to engage intellectually with anything Coates says. That's shows me you're not that serious about this. And this is your friend. This is someone I assume, have had deep conversations with before. His intellect. Yeah, again, we getting back to, like, even how he talks about and approaches is so disrespectful. Like, this should be a much more substantive conversation from the two of them, and it's just not.
Now, here, this part, you really get to see it clearly, because this is, I think, the most incisive Coates gets in criticizing Kirk directly. Sorry, I keep doing that. Klein directly. And it's over this abortion point. This is where Coates finally is like, look, bruh, you can't do all this fence sitting. If you're going to say the Democratic Party is going to give up on abortion, you have to know what the dickens you're actually talking about.
It is forcing me to rethink things I would prefer not to rethink. I will give you an example, because people are mad at me on this one right now.
Please.
I said in a podcast with my colleague Russ Douthan, he was pushing me on left radicalism. I was saying, I don't care about left-wing radicalism. I don't think it's some great threat. I don't think it's a huge political problem. I worry about left-wing pessimism, fatalism, that we are losing and don't want to change anything. And I said that the question for me is, how do we win Senate seats in places like Kansas and Missouri and Ohio? I said, I would like to see us doing things like in red states, and here I meant redder than those, running pro-life candidates. People got real upset about that, and I get why. But in 2010, when the Affordable Care Act passed, there were 40 House Democrats who were pro-life at some level. You had to do this whole negotiation with this guy, Bart Stupak.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And on the bright side, you don't have to have those negotiations now. And on the downside, you can't pass the Affordable Care Act. And the point is not...
I just want to say that there's like a huge logical fallacy here. The fact that 15 years ago, when the country was less advanced on a lot of different issues, we were in the midst of like the Bush era Christian conservatism. We weren't where we are now on gay marriage. We aren't where we are now in a lot of things, that there were previously more pro-choice Democrats. Doesn't mean that it was because there were pro-choice Democrats that we had more Democrats. Like, that's an insane thing. That's like saying because there were less, like, just like causation is not correlation. Because there were fewer electric cars and we had a 60 vote majority in the Senate, it was the election. Like, we got to get rid of all the electric cars today so we can have a 60 vote majority in the Senate. Like, it makes no sense.
Well, Brie, you phrasing it like that. That's like, I don't know, 90% of the New York Times opinion columns are basically making arguments like this. Like, we need to get back to gas-powered cars when Democrats have a 60-seat majority. Like, those things aren't connected at all. But again, he picks and chooses what to point to, what to throw under the bus, what is the social issue that he thinks, now he never says it, but he thinks is causing right-wingers to not want to vote Democrat. And like, what if it's all of these issues, Ezra? Because what if they vote for Republicans because they like Republicans and what they stand for? And so they're not going to vote for Democrats. And what Democrats should do, again, it seems silly even talking about Democrats like they're an actual party or whatever. In the fantasy world that Ezra Klein lives in, where the Democrats and Republicans are fighting against one another, the Democrats should be shoring up their base and focusing on their, as you've already said, their team. because it worked for the other side. If you're replicating what happened on the other side, you don't take their values, you take their strategy.
The strategy, feed the base. Feed the base. Yep. All right.
And the chat is saying liberals are not the left, Democrats. Obviously, we all understand all that. It's hard to talk. It's like Ezra Klein is like Cypher in the Matrix. You know, the guy who wanted to stay in the Matrix. It's like, in order to have this conversation with him, we kind of have to buy into his distorted worldview just a little bit.
Sure. Okay.
That
Let's
issue,
go.
right? That one issue, although things like, the example, say Susan Collins, where she's in theory pro-choice, but she votes for Mitch McConnell and John Thune as leader.
Right.
Like, that's how you build power on some level, right? If you have those, Joe Manchin, like, I wish he were still a senator from West Virginia, as much as I have deep disagreements with him. I think that I am a person, I think you are a person, whether you admit it or not, who is one of the people with a, voice in shaping what our political culture is. And I believe at some level that political strategy is downstream from political culture. I think it means exploring things that are uncomfortable and being pretty disciplined in a way, maybe.
That's an interesting admission I'm just kind of catching upon my third listen. He acknowledges, he says, you do political culture, which is another way of saying you are kind of a moral tastemaker, the way that Coates has positioned himself as being. And then he says, politics follows from that. Acknowledging that Ta-Nehisi Coates' like efforts to make moral cases for how the world should be does influence politics. But instead of going, and therefore I should also be a cultural and moral tastemaker, he says,
I haven't been, about separating the question of what I believe from what I believe will win power.
He says, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to separate what I believe from what I think will win. I'm going to even presume that those are two different things. He doesn't even entertain the idea that they're the same. I'm going to back it up a little bit because I know I chopped that up a little bit in my pausing it.
And I believe at some level that political strategy is downstream from political culture. I think it means exploring things that are uncomfortable and being pretty disciplined in a way, maybe I haven't been, about separating the question of what I believe from what I believe will win power. Because I currently think that the cost of losing power is horrifying and dangerous, and we can't keep doing it. So that's
Yeah,
where
so
my
can
head
we
is.
start with that exactly? Because immediate thing, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the immediate thing that springs to mind for me in that question is not who you're abandoning, but how do you square the fact that, in fact, reproductive rights has proven to be pretty popular in red states, and I'm thinking about referendums that have been passed, such that they've had to, change the rules. Like, how do you separate that?
When I sort of said this in glance.
Like, the people who didn't vote for Kamala, but give me my reproductive rights.
I think that I was using first pro-life as an illustrative example.
Okay.
But there,
Okay.
Wait, you were just going to gamble away reproductive freedoms rhetorically as an illustrative example. Excuse me.
It's so funny.
Excuse me for getting big mad about it.
Okay, last I checked, I don't know. The word illustrative does still imply that it should be true, makes sense. Like that's what you're illustrating. The point. The point, you're illustrating the point with this example. Why would you use an example that doesn't count? That doesn't matter. Like, and that's obviously a question that he would be asked, right? And to not have any explanation for it, to just assume, like, what were you talking about? If you're talking about strategy and winning, he keeps saying winning. Says it more than Charlie Sheen used to say it. People, I thought he was I thought he was a wonk like the other guy, but I guess he's not. He's not wonkish because he's not talking numbers. He's not talking about polls. He's not even talking about he's not even those popularity polls. He's not making the case for him. It's like, well, trans rights are such and such, not that popular in such a state. He's not doing any of that. That's deeply unserious to me. Even as a podcast host, just as a podcast host, you should have those ducks in a row. It's disrespectful to Coates not to have that. It's disrespectful to the audience. It's disrespectful for everybody who needs to get an abortion to have a New York Times columnist again, I also want to point out, it's kind of he's very irresponsible with a lot of what he's saying. Again, calling the Epstein victims liars implicitly, and now suggesting throwing out there, Democrats should throw trans people under the bus. Democrats should throw abortion rights under the bus. People do listen to Ezra Klein. Bad people, but powerful people read him.
To be clear, Neera Tanden, this generated a whole cycle, not of just people who are mad at him, but people like Neera Tanden who anded this idea. Neera Tanden, I'm trying to work on a piece about this right now, but God knows I can't finish a thing. But people resurfaced all these old tweets from midterms in 2022 where she clearly evinced an understanding that abortion was helping Democrats fight off the red wave, saying abortion is driving people to the polls, abortion is a popular issue for Democrats, and now she's willing to turn around and say, actually, Ezra Klein is right, we got to make hard choices. And here's what I think is happening. Neera Tanden is not stupid, and she might not even actually want to cut abortion rates, but what the thing that Democrats do is they prime the pump. They're always priming the pump for you to accept something you don't agree with as a quote unquote hard choice for political expediency. It is no accident, I believe, that Hillary Clinton's biography was titled what? Her post 2016 election biography was called what? Hard Choices. No. She wrote another one called Hard Choices. Look it up. Hard because this is the entire brand. The Democrats' whole brand is, look what you made me do. I didn't want to do it, and they're the abuser, and you're taking it. I didn't want to do it. Look, we all want the family. We all want dinner on the table, and for us to be happy as a family and go to bed. But you put it on there late, and my stuffing was cold, and I had to beat your ass. Look what you made me do. We all want good things. I don't want to cancel abortion rights, but hey, we got to do it to protect women.
We got to win.
Because we got to win. And if we don't win at any cost, then who knows what the other guy will do. And he's about to get to this point, and it's so perverse. We gotta telegraph that we also hate trans people in order to win, because if the other guy wins, they'll hate trans people. Hey, the trans person made me do it. Stop hitting yourself.
It's like he's not having a trans person on to talk about this in a concrete term. He's not.
Well, he'll say yes and no. He says he has Sarah McBride, the trans elected on, and he does this thing where I also don't appreciate where they use. Look, there have been trans people elected in red states on kitchen table issues. Saying that you can win even being trans on kitchen table issues is not the same thing as saying, let's denigrate trans people or buy into right-wing denigration of trans people in order to win. I agree. I'm not sitting here making the argument that Democrats need to run on let's have trans women compete at the collegiate level against cis women. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying you don't have to talk. If you think it's not politically a strong argument for you, just don't talk about it. Talk about the things that are strong, like protecting trans people's substantive rights. And you can even disagree about the sports piece if you want to, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And more importantly, you can win by not talking about the trans stuff at all, but by setting your own agenda instead of being reactionary and giving people something affirmative to vote for, so they'll care about something more than what some trans 15-year-old is doing on our high school soccer team. They passed an anti-trans law in Utah that affected one person. One elementary school, like middle school girl.
Yeah.
There was one middle school girl.
And the Democrats could also just fight on this stuff because trans people have. This is not something that hasn't been fought on, that people haven't won on. They are allowing the right to push trans people out of society and not doing anything about it. This is bullshit to think that this is an issue that animates a lot of people, except for the right, who will never vote for the Democrats ever.
Yeah, and they're also for the right. And I will say it's giving like first they came for the communists. The trans sport thing is just the Trojan horse for not just broader attacks in the trans community, but broader attacks generally. In the same way that the attacks on the pro-Palestine students is a broader attack on all of our First Amendment freedoms. And it is just absolutely killing me that people can't understand that. Like I fully get wanting to cordon off the sports stuff, But if you're doing that, if you're bringing it up to talk about how much you agree with the right on the sports stuff, I need you to be 10 toes down on defending trans people in all the other respects. And I need you to be talking about them compassionately the way that Ta-Nehisi Coates does, and centering first and foremost that they have rights that need to be upheld and protected in our society, because we are as strong as our protections for the weakest of us.
That's never going to happen. If you're willing to concede to these bizarre right wingers on the smallest things, you're going to keep conceding. You don't have to.
Correct.
They don't concede shit.
They don't
concede shit.
They don't.
So no. Trans women in sports, yes. What the fuck is wrong with it? You don't like it, get over it. Don't play sports. That's what they would say. That's what they would say. If this was the opposite, that's what they would say.
They're
if
saying
there was a trans athlete
in the streets.
If there was a trans women's athlete who was MAGA and there were people complaining about it, they would say, fuck off.
Well, honey, let Caitlyn Jenner put them sneakers back on and do what we know what she can do.
They wouldn't have any problem with it.
Let her hit that triathlon for the senior citizen crowd and see how it goes. Okay. Let's push a little bit through this section. Oh, sorry. This is the bit that people were big mad about, in fact.
There are many red districts in this country. And there are states that we do not even think about competing in anymore, right? I'm not talking about Ohio here. I think you have to try things.
You were talking about Ohio.
Moderation kind of things. You could try going much harder on economic populism, which some people are trying. I think you might need to combine those two strategies, right? Which is sort of the Dan Osborne in Nebraska approach.
Yes. It could be economic populism gets you there without hurting marginalized communities. Don't combine shit. Just try. How about we just try the economic populism before we go down a fascist road?
I think that I think even before the question of what your policies are, and I believe this very deeply, there's a question of whether or not people feel like you respect them and like them, even if they disagree with you. Before, I think people will give you power. They don't even ask, do they like you? They ask whether you like them. And I think a lot of the country feels we don't like them. Not only do I believe that, I know that. I've seen the focus groups. I've seen the survey data. I've talked to the people who work on this. And that's going to require, changing that is going to require making moves that somehow send a loud enough signal that people begin to think we've changed at some level. Sherrod Brown.
This is so deep, actually. And again, I'm hearing this for the first time. He thinks that the problem is that a lot of the country, conservatives, think that Democrats don't like them. And that's why they're not voting for Democrats. Now, I think there's a sliver of something there that's like the open contempt that someone like Hillary Clinton shows in the deplorable comment is a problem.
Yeah.
That being said, the idea that that's what's motivating Republican voters, even worse than that. Okay, if you think you need to, the difference. Okay. Here's what it is. There's a difference between needing voters to believe you respect them as human beings whose lives are worth dignity, versus liking them in the way that you would want to be friends because you agree with them substantively and we're all on the same page. And I think Ezra is confusing those. Yes, the deplorables comment was a problem because as president, you're responsible in a really real way for all these people's lives. And you have to demonstrate that you think that their lives are worthwhile and that they're not deplorable and they're not irredeemable because they have human value. It's a more spiritual, high-minded kind of acceptance of someone's humanity. Ezra seems to think that they have to think that you actually like them. Like I agree with like I'm not going to judge you for living differently. I have no substantive values of my own. I'm just going to concede to whatever you say is right and good in order to get your vote. And I agree. You have to demonstrate that you care about people. And the left, we care about people. We don't laugh when bad things befall Republican towns, when a tornado goes through a Republican town, or when a Republican person gets shot at a school or something. Because we have a basic respect for human life and human value. Look, Ta-Nehisi Coates, the whole left is rushing to be apologetic about Charlie Kirk's death and publicly mourn him. But that's a different thing. That's a different thing for you got to have that kind of almost priestly you've sinned. But I love you. We're all Americans. We're all God's children. And he's wanting to get approval like he's in a high school clique and he wants to be invited to sit at the table, as opposed to wanting to be the principal who just respects and takes care of all of the students.
Well, here's the thing. It's like, I don't know if I quite agree with everything you said just there, but I know that Charlie Kirk and the right doesn't care about any of that. They don't care about dehumanizing people who don't support them or vote for them. Trump mocks his own supporters and makes fun of them. He calls them suckers. So this idea about respect or liking, some people like to be domed. So that's just another, that's just to complicate this very simple world that Ezra Klein sets up, where if you're nice enough and you just give people rational arguments, they'll support you, vote for you, and you win. That's not how people work. That's just not how people work in general. That's not why people support politicians, political campaigns. Oh, I think they respect me. That's not, I'm going to vote for them. That's not, I don't think that's really why people vote. They vote for things a little bit more about passion, less about, I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It's just, it's talking about a politics that doesn't really exist except for in the New York Times columns. Like, it doesn't exist in the real world. This isn't why Trump won. I don't think, like, could you say anything that Ezra Klein is saying is why Barack Obama won, for example?
No, and it was the economic, like, I don't mean to just be promoting my own articles, but I do think that people should go and reread Defensive Litmus Test and Current Affairs magazine, but also my response piece to Ta-Nehisi Coates's First White President article. I think it's the best thing, frankly, that I've ever written, because it just holds up, and it makes exactly that point. Like, Barack Obama as a president sucks, drones, we can all talk about those things. But in terms of how he campaigned and why he won because he was pretending to be Bernie. He won on economic populism. And I go back and I cite those speeches and I talk about the way he was characterized at the time. That mix has always been popular. That is the sweet spot that makes everybody popular. The outsider willing to criticize the establishment and be an economic populist. That's the formula. The formula is not changing. The recipe is the same. But the Democrats are unwilling to even pretend. Like, Kamala could have just lied about Gaza. Do you know what I mean? She could have just lied. Trump
She did.
Trump lied about it.
She did lie about it, but just in the
No.
wrong direction.
What she did, she wasn't even to do a good lie. She was like, oh, Palestinians are human beings, and Biden won't say that, so crown me. No, the one thing, this is also in this piece that I need to be writing. I'm old enough to remember that there was a 3-week lull when Kamala became the president, where she did no media. Sorry, the candidate. She did no media for 3 weeks. People were starting to ask questions like, what's going on here? She's such a bad candidate. They won't put her in front of the cameras. She was enjoying, like, the high in polls of just not being Joe Biden. And I think our people didn't want to ruin it. And everyone was able to project their hopes and dreams onto her as long as she didn't open her mouth. But the one thing that her press team put out during that time, the one bit of information was to affirm that Kamala Harris would not be supporting an arms embargo against Israel. And that's it. That's the whole kit and caboodle. If you don't support an arms embargo, I don't give a damn what you have to say, thoughts and feelings, hopes and prayers about Palestinians. Oh, I'm going to acknowledge the basic reality of there being a human being. Get the fuck out of here. I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. You want a crown for that?
Well, the funny thing is that a lot of the KI do want to give her a crown. It's like, oh, Kamala told us. She, like, they still, it's strange because they lost, but then they blame everyone else and then still act like they did everything right. It's very strange. I think Ezra Klein, in a way, is kind of doing the same thing, because he's not really analyzing what actually went wrong. Yes, he's saying we lost, and that sounds humble, but he doesn't take any real credit for that loss. Even when Coates kind of pushes him on it, he doesn't get into the details of what about his messaging failed? What about his politics specifically failed? And what does that say about his politics? He doesn't really get into that. He doesn't even really get into why Donald Trump won. What is the real reason he won? He's not interested in that. He has a little hobby horse where if you think on these issues, reproductive rights, trans rights, I think he might have just been afraid of saying anything in front of Coates about things like DEI, because I think that might be on
Yeah.
Klein list two of things the Democrats went too far on. But if he goes into all of that, right? But he never really deals with why they actually lost, even though he wrote the article about Biden and the dementia.
100%.
That's one of the main issues why they lost. It's a bizarre thing. I don't know what he's doing, but it's messed up. It's wrong. It's
100%.
bad.
100%. Okay, we're so close. We're so close to getting through the
should be able to win in Ohio.
Yes.
The reason he cannot win in Ohio is the Democratic Party itself is a millstone around his neck that drags him down. So what do you do about I'm not here to tell you I got the answer.
Yeah.
What I would feel much better about is I felt there was like a strategic discipline about finding it.
So I just if you will take this very gentle pushback.
Yeah, please.
I think
you're here for it.
I haven't seen exactly what people are saying, online in terms of this, but I do think like what immediately strikes me is if you take, I know you would just, it's not, the example necessarily that you would hold out, about reproductive rights, but I think the problem with musing about that is abandoning it is a very real possibility for people who don't have the option necessarily to fly to another state or do X, Y, and Z. So I suspect when they hear somebody of your status, even if it's not the example you mean, putting it out in the air, like they feel, and it's not just that you're putting it out in the air, it's putting it out in the air, and actually, I don't necessarily even mean that one. No, like if you're going to say that, I think you really got to
stand behind
you
it.
got to put the data behind it. I think that's really, really important.
I will say, and I think this is actually the nub of it, right? Like I'm glad we're sort of here. I am saying the thing it sounds like I am saying. To be very, very clear.
Right.
Pause that.
I think in a place
Pause
like
that.
Nebraska, you should try to run some pro-life Democrats. I wish people.
What was that?
I am saying the thing it sounds like I'm saying. What sort of alien lizard person brain? Because he's basically admitting it's like, oh, I was lying when I said I just pulled that example out of thin air. No, I actually mean we do need to do this. Like that's such a strange way to admit that I was lying, and you kind of caught me on it. Sorry.
Yep. 100%. 100%. And like, God bless Coates for like saying the thing, but he's so soft. He's so gentle. He's giving grace that is not due. And I appreciate and respect Coates, but oh my God, like say what, like your friend in quotation marks was willing to, from one of the highest pulpits in the land, the New York Times, the only newspaper that still works, that's still like profitable, from the tentpole podcast on that station, America's foremost listened to by the establishment voice, floated when he knew people were listening the idea of backtracking off of one of the Democrats' most popular policies and imperiling the reproductive freedom and the lives of half the country. And then he said, whoopsies, I didn't really mean it when you pressed me on the specifics of whether that was politically effective. And then we're going to cycle back when it was too embarrassing to admit that you messed up and be like, no, I meant it. And here's why. Like you at that point, you have every license to drag him for filth.
Yes.
And I would argue it's your obligation to drag him, because it suddenly becomes, very few of us are ever going to be in the position that Coates is in right now. I would love to debate Ezra Klein. I would love to have him on the show. I reached out to someone who's had him on their show in the hopes of having him on my show. So I'm going to send out an invitation, but I wouldn't hold my breath. So Coates is in a unique position to basically end this guy, to end his credibility, or at very least to force him to recalibrate, because he's been so exposed as incorrect in his political thinking. And that will do a public service in a very real way. And he is being very gentle.
Yes.
Given that that's his responsibility in this moment, I would say. Okay.
Instead of saying that an expressive or strategic question in politics was betraying or abandoning the people we wish to protect, I wish what we said was we lost power in a way that allowed Donald Trump to drive the Supreme Court to a 6-3 Republican majority. And that majority overturned Roe v. Wade. Right. It overturned Roe v. Wade and actually abandoned all these people. Right. Actually fucked them over. Right?
I'm losing my mind. Part
of, I think, when I say that like the work of politics has become diminished, it is part of how that happened, that talking about this creates this sort of counter argument. Well, even to discuss it is to abandon. In 2008, as you and I both know.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. He's saying, I wish that instead of characterizing it as abandoning various constituencies, I wish that floating these ideas, like the ones that I floated that was factually incorrect, was taken in good faith, and that we were allowed to debate these ideas as though Coates. This is what's so disrespectful. He is framing it as though Coates objected to the idea of talking about a political maneuver that would help Democrats win because it's inconvenient to his own politics. When the reality is, he was mad that he floated an idea that was not politically pragmatic, that would also hurt people. But Klein needs to frame it. Klein is framing this as, you just aren't willing to be open to debate. And this is where it comes back to the Charlie Kirk of it all. To him, it's process. Even above being correct. The idea of him raising this idea that is unpopular because it's immoral, because it's against your politics. The idea, it's almost a fetish. Here's what it is. It's almost a fetish for saying something that's going to piss off the base, because it means that you are brave and you are a serious thinker that's willing to do the hard thing if people are mad. And if you say something that makes people happy, that inspires the base and turns out votes because they actually like something rather than because they're holding their nose to win, to beat the Republicans, that's too easy.
It's one step above triggered sort of content, right? Like it's one step above like a comedian doing the triggered stuff. Is like
or Charlie Kirk.
Yes,
with a sign on the campus. Tell me I'm wrong. I believe that women shouldn't get abortions late term if they've been raped. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, but it's so weird. It's
debate,
like,
bro.
Yeah, he's trying to be a debate bro, but like a second level debate bro, like a debate bro square. He doesn't want to debate. Because he doesn't actually believe. I don't think Ezra Klein actually believes that women shouldn't have the right. Should not have the right to abortion, but he believes that we should be able to have the conversation, that we can take away the right to abortion if it gets us a win.
Yes, he's edging. He's edging the bad outcome. It's like titillating. It's like, ooh, aren't I a bad boy for suggesting this hard fact? Like hard choices takes on a whole different meaning. These people are sick. They're sick. Leslie. They're sick. Like really listen, like this last little 10 minutes or so of the podcast, it's like so jam-packed. It's a sickness.
Okay.
Sickness. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
Barack Obama ran as a public opponent of gay marriage.
Right.
He ran opposed to it at a time when not only, I won't speak for you, was I not opposed to it, but most of us did not. Yeah. Most of us did not think he was opposed to it.
Right.
Like at his heart, we did not think he was opposed to it.
Right.
But he was playing politics. Right. That playing of politics allowed him to name Supreme Court justices, and that led to the decision that created a constitutional right to same-sex marriage.
Obama did not win because he was against gay marriage.
It's so
Ezra Klein he literally just said Obama won because he was against gay marriage, and therefore he was able to bring gay marriage. That's just didn't happen. That's just not true. He was against gay marriage and he won, but those two things weren't related. And I remember very clearly at the time thinking how embarrassed the campaign seemed to be saying about making this calculation. And people were talking about, what the fuck is Barack Obama doing? He's the hope and change guy. He's the generational guy. That's when people call Zoran a generational political talent, he would not be folding on anything. Generational talents push the conversation, move society forward. They don't get bullied out of their positions, especially if they're ahead in a race. I was
just about to bring up Zoran. I'm so glad you did. And I'm so glad you brought up that he's 20 points ahead. All the DSA crowd is running cover for the idea of him backing off the basic proposition that the NYPD, that within the last 10 years was held to be unconstitutional because of racial discrimination, was not racist. We're at a place where the DSA Jacobin crowd is saying, lay off Zoran. He's allowed to retract his statement that the NYPD is racist. And I would say to you, if we are in a place where Zoran Mamdani is not allowed to say the most obvious statement in the world, which is that the NYPD, I'm not saying call Americans racist. I'm not saying this is some big voter. I'm saying the NYPD, the NYPD. And to your point, Leslie, before he did the walkbacks, which I agree he's been doing, he won doubling down 10 toes on globalize the intifada. And it didn't turn anybody off. He, in fact, won and got all those volunteers because he demonstrated his willingness to stand up to a bully and stand by his convictions. And I agree with you. Who knows the counter? I believe that Barack Obama believed that he couldn't win if he supported gay marriage. Obviously, he believed that. I don't know that I am willing to accept that to be true. Just like I'm not willing to accept the hypothetical that FDR couldn't have passed a New Deal that didn't exclude Black people. Because there were Ezra Kleins at the time, to your point, who were telling him, you just got to make the compromise untested and unproven. Just like Obama made the compromise untested and unproven. And Zoran gave us a glimpse of an uncompromised candidate, and they won. The other example outside of Zoran, Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who won a completely unhinged, says whatever comes off the top of the dome, 100% id campaign, and won. And continues to do it. The man tweeted out a video of Hakeem Jeffries dressed as a mariachi band member today with AI speech coming out of his mouth. And it's not even gonna crack the news cycle.
I'm not even gonna look it up to bother. I'm not even gonna bother. I'm not even gonna
You
bother.
haven't seen this? I can't
I
believe you
haven't seen it. I'm not even gonna bother because it's gonna be something different.
It doesn't
tomorrow.
even matter. It doesn't. Meanwhile, I'm telling you, I've tweeted this. I've said this. The day Brian Kilmeade went on TV and said we should involuntarily euthanize homeless people, he wasn't fired for that.
Yes.
That Black woman, Karen Atia at the Washington Post, was fired for saying Charlie Kirk was racist against Black women because she put quotes around something that wasn't a quote.
Oh,
Brian
no. Bree, I have to correct you. She released a letter. And
that wasn't why she was fired.
No, the reason why she was fired was because essentially she called Charlie Kirk a white man. I'm not joking.
Yes,
she
you're
called
right.
him a white man in a couple of tweets in the context of we should not have to feel sorry for white male racists when they die. And it's just like,
right.
And
So she was racist. She was doing reverse racism, and so she got fired. But Brian Kilmeade can say he's going to kill people, and it's just an apology, and it keeps on going. The day that Brian Kilmeade said kill homeless people, the left, members of the left, not liberals, the left, were saying that Zoran Mamdani needs to moderate to win.
Yes. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Do people not understand what's happened? Not see what's happened? I guess it's scary to sort of admit that, even just getting back to the initial Charlie Kirk thing, we are not living in a don't mock the dead world. When the Pope died, people made fun of him and nobody had a problem with it. Nobody cared because that world is over. That's done. That's in the past. That's not a norm anymore. So of all the
and it never was, by the way. It's just that social media made it obvious. Yeah,
it never was. So it's just about how honest you're willing to be about the world that you actually live in, and Ezra Klein is not honest at all.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. I'm not going to keep stopping it. We're right at the finish line.
Yeah, needed.
I can give you an example from the other side, by the way, too.
Yeah, go for it,
brother. You know what my position was during the election about Palestine, about Gaza. Kamala Harris was running to be the first Black woman to be president of the United States. You cannot imagine how animated Black folks were. And some would argue the base of the Democratic Party, Black women, we're going to, see this thing. She was not taking a position that I thought was particularly moral. I had to talk in front of Black audiences about that. You know what I mean? And I had to do the other thing, which was go before Arab American audiences here, Palestinian American audiences here, and say, look, I'm with you. You can be mad at me. You probably will be mad at me. I get it. But for me, politics is the lesser of two evils. We've been fighting this battle for a long time. We've never had the luxury of electing people that represented the best of us. And this is why I'm voting for her. This is a really, really serious thing. And when you hear these Palestinians Palestinian Americans, and when you hear these Muslim Americans, and when you hear these Arab Americans upset about this, you can't just yell at them. You have to take them seriously. These were hard, very, very difficult conversations. But when I made those conversations, look, man, I had to be buttoned up about it. I just think you take very, very seriously the need to convince people outside of the tent right now, right? About like we have to convince them to come in. I guess what I want from you is I want you to take as seriously people who are in the tent and who are vulnerable and afraid. And if you have to convince them of something that's extremely, extremely uncomfortable, or tell them that you're taking a position that's extremely uncomfortable, I just think you owe them a little more. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
man.
that's fine. I'll take it. But I want to put this on you for a minute.
That's
Right?
fine,
You keep
I'll
sort of
take
putting
it,
it back
bro.
on me.
Bleh, bleh.
Wait, what was that?
Yeah, I'll take it. Bleh. Like he's just
exactly.
no reaction really.
No engagement. He's about to change the subject, but before we let Ezra change the subject, he said it. Coach said it. You got to care about, if you want the tent to be full, you can't just worry about the people outside. You got to worry that the people inside are going to leave. Not just for political expediency, but you got to take care of the people on the inside, that they're vulnerable and they have special needs. And the whole point of you as a party is to care about those people. And what is this tent once you abandon that cause? Not to mention that he brought up Israel, and Ezra Klein is gonna not touch that with a 10-foot pole. The one thing I wish Coates had really done is to squarely say, if you wanted to win this election, you should have done it by opposing the genocide. And there's no other point in having any of these other words spilled in this conversation. If you are willing to make hard choices, stiff choices, then the hardest of them all that you should have been willing to shoulder is breaking with Israel. And Coach should have said that over and over again until Ezra was forced to engage with that reality.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that Coates didn't do that, but that's kind of why he was on the show in some ways,
Yeah, that's why I'm not getting invited. Well, we never know. You never know. All right, here we go. This is the end.
Yeah, I'm open. Go ahead.
You keep putting it back on me here on the Ta-Nehisi Coach Show. What then should we do? What then should be? You are one of the most influential public intellectuals in the country. I know you don't like to think of politics as a thing you do, but it is a thing you do. What, as bad as you know this can get, and given that you're not a hopeless person, or who doesn't think you should just collapse into fatalism, what do you think should happen now?
I think that really depends on what your role is. I don't have a great overarching theory for what everybody needs to do, because I think we all have different positions. I know what my role is. And I do see myself as part of politics, by the way.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very, very important way of answering the question. I mean, I'm not going to be the person that yells at you because, you went on a bunch of right-wing podcasts. As I've said many times, in the course of this interview, I see myself as a writer. I see myself as a journalist. I see myself as someone for whom it's very, very important to state the truth plainly and to clarify things as best I can. I'm not a strategist for the party. And I've tried to, as you raised in that Barack Obama piece, I've tried to respect the difference.
I guess I'm not pushing you to be a political strategist, right? I think that for me, something you see me doing right here, something I think people reacting to me doing, is saying, well, if the fight is this profound and we're losing the fight, then the question is to think about how we fight.
Right.
It's something about knowing that this much of the country is, on the wrong side of what my line would have been.
Right.
Knowing that what Kirk was doing, what people like him were doing, was working.
Right.
That imposes a set of questions upon us that need to be answered.
Right. The thing I'm struggling with in this conversation, and even in that question, is the fact that there are things that you yourself have actually advocated for that, had they been done, we would be having a very different conversation.
I think I wanted to not be close.
You said what?
I wanted to not be close.
See.
The goalpost maneuver there is nuts. Coates points out that he's prematurely making really terrible concessions that are going to hurt people, even though he's already acknowledged that there were off ramps that would have prevented Trump from winning, like not running Joe Biden.
Yes.
Like Gaza, for instance. And when Coates says, well, you could have won, you still could have won without doing these bad things. He says, oh, but I didn't want it to be close.
Oh, well, it wasn't. Yeah, so what are we talking about? Like they listened to you. They ran the type of politics that would not offend Ezra Klein. And she got trampled, and she would have lost even if she had the time. I don't know if Ezra Klein, if there was an open primary, that Ezra Klein would pick Kamala out of the lineup. But did he
Right.
write articles saying under no circumstances can we run Kamala Harris as the nominee? As I
Right.
would, as you or I would have,
Right.
if we were in that position. No, so he lost. He didn't do all he could do. And now all his new ideas are awful, even though and he's holding on to this, even though all his friends are telling him this is awful, and he's losing friends over this in his personal life. That's the thing you gotta understand, is like, you go into this podcast. I think a lot of people watch this show thinking this is just a meeting of the two minds that just happens. Like, no, Klein knows all this. He's got it down. He's heard all of this louder and clearer. Even if Coates was more direct with him, he would just, pivot or not release the show, possibly.
Yep. And it's like one more minute and then the podcast wraps up. So I think that's it for us for listening. You've been very patient staying here for 3 hours, Leslie. I still have to close my rings before midnight. You know me, I'm on a streak. I'm going to answer the questions in the chat. Leslie, you don't have to stay for that. I love it if you want to, but I'm releasing you from your obligation to sit here with me.
Thank you. Yes, I'm gonna go get some rest. Everyone stay safe, wear a mask. COVID is everywhere and it's bad. Have a good one. Sesh.show. We have a great podcast. Please check it out and subscribe.
Please do. I love listening to Struggle Session. I adore Leslie. He's been so consistent, and you should go subscribe, listen, download, follow the show, give it a star, a like on iTunes, all the things you can do to boost content. Do you have a YouTube page as well, Leslie?
Yes, I do. You can find me on there. I have long COVID. I think most people know. So I haven't been consistent with all the channels. I was trying to get into TikTok, but now Israel owns it. Like, what the hell am I gonna do, buddy?
Right. Well, look, just go ahead and follow and subscribe to his channel so that when he does put out content, you get a notification. That's really important. And there's like over 1,000 of you here, but someone pointed out there were only like 45 likes. So let's try to get that number up to at least 500. I should have been said, Katie Halper taught me, and I am not learning the lessons of my superiors. I should have been saying this throughout, to leave a like. What are you doing? Smash that like button, yada, yada, yada. But I believe that we can make up for it in the last 5 minutes or so that we're on the stream. There's still over 1,000 of you in the chat. So smash that like button. Leslie, you're a king among men. Thank you. There's no one I would have rather have done this with. An amazing podcast co-host, just best in the field. Thank you. Get some rest. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.